So, my name is Charlotte Vignon. I am one of the co-curators of the exhibition Sèvres Extraordinaire sculpture from 1740 until today that opened yesterday with a special opening and will open to the public tomorrow. Today is the symposium organized in in conjunction with this exhibition, and on behalf of Susan Weber, director and founder of the Bard Graduate Center, I would like to invite you to this beautiful symposium with a really interesting and great speakers. So I was asked to do an introduction to to this exhibition and to this symposium, and to bring a little bit everyone to the same level of knowledge. So apologize for the people who know very well the story of Sèvres. It will get more interesting when I leave. For so for nearly three centuries, for nearly 3 centuries, the Sèvres porcelain manufactory and the Sèvres Museum have preserved, enriched, and share a unique heritage. Together, these two institutions, which are located on the same site in Sèvres, just outside of Paris, celebrate the medium of ceramics with a deep appreciation for its form and technique, and for the beauty of the work of art produced there throughout the ages. The manufacture was created in 1745 in the old royal chateau in Vincennes with the goal to produce, quote, Maison-like porcelain painted and gilded with human figures. At that point, it was called the Vincennes Manufactory. And here I show you a ball made at Vincennes around 1751 with the inside of the ball depicting the Chateau of Vincennes. In 1756, the workshop moved to the town of Sèvres, halfway between Paris and Versailles, nearby the Chateau of Bellevue, built for Madame de Pompadour, Louis XV's mistress and a porcelain collector, who became a powerful advocate of the manufactory. 3 years later, the king became the company's principal shareholder and took Sèvres under direct management. And within the Crown estate and under his patronage, Sèvres became the most important producer of soft-paste porcelain in Europe. From the moment that Louis XV assumed management of Sèvres in 1759, the manufactory has been the property of the French state. This special relationship was envied by other manufacturers because it offered many benefits. One of them was that the manufactory was not expected to make a profit. Instead, it was expected to enhance the global prestige of French art, a purpose also furthered by the tradition of gifting Sèvres porcelain to foreign dignitaries and aid of states. And here I'm showing you a tureen from the large service, table service offered by Louis XV to the King of Denmark, Frederick V, in 1757. Another great advantage was during period of financial stability, the Sèvres manufactory was able to invest in expensive technical research, the fruit of which were made available to all French ceramic manufacturers. State patronage also attracting leading artists who were keen to work for the royal, imperial, and national manufacturers. Perhaps more significantly, the manufacturers had always avoid industrialization, allowing it to preserve and transmit its unique artisanal knowledge. Public ownership also made it possible to preserve most of the Sèvres archives, a rarity among ceramic factories and a boon for scholarship. There are, however, significant drawbacks to public ownership. France's turbulent history has exposed Sèvres to succession of financial and political crises, including revolutions, wars, and civil unrest. And during the French Revolution, Sèvres endured severe budget cuts, and its traditional clientele disappeared. Despite continuing criticism that it was an institution producing luxuries for the elite, the manufacturers has survived over 290 years. As the stage changed, Sèvres remained a constant, accommodating itself to the tastes and also occasionally to the political demands and of the new regimes. And you see the changing of taste over time. And here I wanted just to show you a service that was recently commissioned by the current French president, Emmanuel Macron, to show you that the state continued to be very present in commissions. Finally, except for a short period of financial autonomy from 1926 to 1941, the manufacturer's revenue and budget have been very tied to the state, issues that complicate its day-to-day organization. Today, at the Sèvres manufactory, 120 artisans work in nearly 20 distinct workshops, all exclusively manual and each with its own specialty, from the making of the porcelain paste to the shaping of form to the final decoration of the pieces. In collaboration with invited artists and designers, the manufacturer produce today tableware, furniture, vases, sculpture, a very rich collection or array of porcelain objects that are distinguished by their originality and exceptional quality. And here I will show you several objects. I should tell you that all of the objects, maybe except this one, is in the collection in the exhibition next door. So here is a vase created with the Japanese design collective Nendo, and another one made in collaboration with the American artist Betty Woodman. The sculpture Odore di Femina by the Belgian artist Johan Creten, also in the show. And here a sculpture called Eruption by the Vietnamese artist Thun Van Tran. The manufacturer has also collaborated with the American artist Jim Dime. And here is the piece of Jim Dime in the exhibition, and with the architect Christian Bischer. And you see him here. This piece on your left is in the show. Despite the international reputation of Sèvres porcelain and its presence in large quantity in many museums in France and abroad, only one previous exhibition has been organized on the manufacturer's long history. Sèvres, 1740 to 2008, because it was at the time 2008, from Madame de Pompadour to the 21st century, a passion for art. And it was organized as a touring exhibition by the Sèvres Manufacturing Musées Nationaux. And the exhibition traveled to Asia in 2007-2008. And it took a different name. It went first to Taipei and after to Seoul. And at Seoul, it was under the name Sèvres 1740 to 2008, from Madame de Pompadour to Louise Bourgeois. So you see a little bit how they marketed the show. As the first exhibition that tells the long and extraordinary history of the Sèvres manufactory through sculpture, Sèvres Extraordinaire, organized by the Bard Graduate Center in collaboration with Sèvres Manufacturing Musée National, is a pivotal event in the history of the famed French manufactory. With this exhibition, we wanted to tell the extraordinary story of the Sèvres manufactory through a lesser known part of its production, sculpture, while bringing to light the significant role of artist, designer, architect in making the manufactory a success over the last 290 years. Here, sculpture is used in its broader sense to include extraordinary three-dimensional vases, also centerpieces for dining table. It also includes an inkstand, a sugar bowl, salt, a set for smoker, rare bowls, cup and saucer, alongside more expected objects such as busts, figures, medallions. figures, another figure, medallions, and low reliefs. Whether functional, decorative, or simply objet d'art, this sculpture dating from 1740 until today, alongside many drawings and a few rare terracotta models and plaster molds, that are all the treasures. These, the plaster mold, terracotta, and drawings are the treasures of the Sèvres archives. All of them tell the story of a remarkable enterprise that have succeeded through time to always renew itself while keeping its high standards for quality, innovation, and creativity. Also, an enterprise that through times has managed to survive many political, financial, and technical challenges to become an emblem of French art and industry. Many of the objects on view have never been exhibited outside France, and all except one piece belong to the collection of Sèvres and Limoges Manufactory Musée Nationaux. This institution that regroup the Sèvres Manufactory, the Musée National de la Céramide, as well as the Musée National Adrien du Boucher in Limoges. If the manufactory is a place of creation and innovation and scientific research, the museum, aside its traditional function as a museum, is also a place of research, especially on the history of the Sèvres manufactory as well as the history of ceramic in general. This exhibition is accompanied, so that is the museum. The exhibition is accompanied by an extensively illustrated catalogue written by Tamara Préau, who held the position of archivist at the Sèvres Manufactory for more than 40 years and is today considered as one of the most important historians of the Sèvres Manufactory. Two other members of the curatorial team contributed to this extraordinary volume: Soazic Guillemin, head of register and art historian at the Sèvres Museum, as well as Judith Cernogora, curator of contemporary art at the Sèvres Museum. There is no doubt that this very heavy volume will be a reference for generations of scholars to come. So the three of them are participating to today's symposium, presenting their latest subject of interest and research, not included in the book. They are joined by another Sèvres curator, Viviane Mesqui, specialist of 18th century ceramic, as well as Linda Roth, curator of European decorative art at the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum at Hartford, Connecticut. I encourage of course, all of you to come again and again at the exhibition. Bring friends, colleagues, family members. I also encourage you to make a short trip to Sèvres next time you are in Paris. It's worth it. It's one of the hidden secrets of France. And finally, as a few words of conclusion, I would like to thank everyone involved in this extraordinary exhibition catalogue. The list is far too long, but this project could have never come to life without the support of Susan Weber. So Susan, thank you for making that happen. And now the symposium can start. I will introduce, without any transition, Tamara Préau. So while exhibition and the catalogue that accompany them frequently aim to provide new scholarship, rarely an exhibition is based, as it is the case here, on the work and remarkable career of a single individual. Tamara Préau was the archivist of the Sèvres Manufactory for over 40 years, and this capacity, she was responsible to reorganize the institution, or organize actually, the institution archival material on the history of production and to make the information available to the public. During her long career at the Sèvres Manufactory, she has published widely on the subject in books, articles, exhibition catalogue. She has also curated important exhibition, and I will mention only two of them: Alexandre Brognard and the Triumph of Art and Industry, 1800-1847, that took place at the Bard Gallery Center in 1997, and La Manufacture des Lumières, who took place at Sèvres in 2015. Thanks for us, she has continued to work and publish widely after she retired, and she's today the main author of Sèvres Extraordinaire. Her knowledge on Sèvres, porcelain, and on the history of the manufactory has no limits. In French, we say that she's a puits de science, I think a well of science. And today she will share with us research on the dynasties of sculpture at Sèvres. It's a really treat for us to have us in New York. So, Tamara, please.
One of the privileges enjoyed by the workers of the royal manufacture in Sèvres was the possibility of training a son or nephew or daughter or niece. The manufactory did not always hire them, but they had a good training and reference. I would like to look today at some of the dynasties of sculptors. We can begin with the Duplessis family. The father, Jean-Claude Duplessis, a bronze maker, was paid 1,450 livres in 1748 for mounting a bouquet of Vincennes flowers offered to the king that could have been similar to this one in the British Royal Collection, where a sunflower clock and some over decoration has been added later. The shareholders of the Vincennes Company were so pleased with his work that he was immediately hired to design all the new shapes. Jean Helot, the chemist in charge of verifying and improving the recipes and processes, wrote about him. Skillful for shapes. He comes twice a week for 12 livres per day, being fed. It is a very skillful man, useful for the manufacture, but very slow. This is difficult to believe when you think of the immense number of shapes he created, either for useful wares, such as this sauce boat. You can see in the exhibition the only terracotta sketch kept in the archives, and here the porcelain translation, or for vases, such as the strange vase à tête d'éléphant. He even designed a sculptural group for which he was paid 600 livres in 1763, although some examples had been produced from 1761. The nymphs with a shell also in the exhibition. There is a possibility that Falconet, then head artist in charge of sculpture, helped with the figures of the nymphs. In 1758, Duplessis Père became an orfèvre du roi, goldsmith to the king. This was to thank him for creating for Sèvres a special machine to produce irregular or oval models, for which he was paid 2,099 livres in 1755. This title meant that since he could not become a member of the Parisian Guild of Goldsmiths because of the numerus clausus, he was granted the title by special decision of the king. His son, Jean-Claude Thomas Duplessis, was paid in 1752 for shapes and models. At the time, he could have been simply working for his father. He became a master bronze maker in 1765 and was paid regularly by Sèvres after the death of his father in 1774 for designs, models, and bronze mounts. He published books of designs of others, and John Whitehead has shown that some of them were used in Sèvres, as for this undecorated hard paste tureen today in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Geoffrey de Bellec had suggested that Duplessis fils could have designed the shape of this vase à bandeau from the British Royal Collection and its mount. In July 1781, Jean de Montucla, secretary to the Comte d'Angevilliers, then director of buildings and manufactures responsible for Sèvres, wrote to Antoine Régnier, the director of the manufacture. Monsieur Pajou, meaning the sculptor Augustin Pajou, gave a very laudatory report to Monsieur le Comte of the garniture made by Monsieur Duplessis. I have been delighted by this, since it put me in a position to help this gallant homme immediately. Duplessis-Fils died in 1783 while beginning to work on the big vase with reliefs about Diana, entirely designed by Louis-Simon Boiseau to show the superiority of Sèvres over the numerous rival manufactures created after the discovery of kaolin deposits. And it was Pierre-Philippe Thomire who produced all the bronze mounts for this vase, and who from then on produced most of the mounts for Sèvres until the first years of the 19th century. Then we come to the Brongniart family. When Alexandre Brongniart was chosen as director of the manufacture in 1800, he wanted to change all the shapes because he hated the rocaille style of most of them. But he had no money to pay artists for new designs. He had to rely on friends and on his father, architect and decorator Alexandre Théodore Brongniart, who gave a great number of shapes and decoration, such as for this fruit bowl with sirens for the Olympic service of 1806, the first of the great services created during the First Empire. Brongniart père also designs all sorts of friezes, including this military one for the special service ordered by Napoleon in 1807. The emperor had specified that he wanted no portraits or battle scenes, only landscapes evoking pleasant memories. This is a happy memory for the emperor. So you see here an episode of the Egyptian campaign when Bonaparte saved the life of General Caffarelli, who almost drowned because of a wooden leg. Brongniart père also designed, as early as 1806, friezes in the style of the Gothic churches and monuments for the project of a service on French history that was never produced, a very early work in what is called in France Gothique troubadour, the 19th century style inspired by Gothic monuments, generally dated to the 1820s. Let us now look at the Brachard family that has created some confusions. The father, Nicolas Brachard, entered Sèvres in 1754 as a repairer, working from 1774 in the new workshop for low relief. He was still working freelance on medallions in 1809 after his retirement. He worked at the same time as his eldest son, Jean-Charles Nicolas, always called Brachard Aîné, who also worked on low relief during the same years. Since we have no record of the production of the low relief workshop, we cannot decide who was the author of several portrait medallions of actors of the Revolution, simply signed Brachard. Brachard Aîné was born in 1766. He entered the manufacture in 1776 as a student in the painting school. He became a sculptor in 1782. Then in 1887, he was named assistant head of kilns and pastes, and there is even a mention of a Pat Brachard. But since he refused to obey the orders of the new head chemist, Frédéric Gasse, he was again a sculptor from 1791, working in the low relief workshop, except during the few years when he left to fight at the frontier. He soon worked not only on medallions but also in 3 dimensions. Denis Désiré Rieucreux, who was in charge of all the collections since at least 1814, in his catalogue of the models of the manufacture, attributed to him these 2 terracotta busts of Barras and Viala, children who died heroically for the Revolution, dating them to 1795. Since the busts were not produced in porcelain until 1889, for the exhibition celebrating the first 100 years of the Revolution, they could have been exercises to show Braccia-René's talents as a sculptor. He often worked from designs of other artists. One of his first creations, in 1805, was the figure of an Egyptian for the centerpiece of the Egyptian service created between 1805 and 07. Brongniart wrote that he had asked this from Braccia-René because the other sculptors in Paris were too expensive, and that he hoped that with the advice and help of his friend, the sculptor Antoine Denis Chaudet, Brachard would produce a satisfying figure. All the Egyptian service, shapes, painted landscapes, hieroglyphs on the friezes, and sculptures for the centerpiece were derived from the book Voyage dans la Basse et dans la Haute Égypte, published in 1802 by Dominique Vivant Denon, using the drawings made during the Egyptian campaign of General Bonaparte. The book had a volume of illustrations, and the only ones that Braccia-René could have used were these two drawings, so his figure was a real creation. All along his career in Sèvres, he worked from designs by other artists. For instance, he made the plaster model after the drawing by Brongniart Père of a sugar bowl, also for the Olympic service of 1806. The object was later considered as an incense burner. Brachard worked mostly for Alexandre Évariste Fragonard, son of the painter Jean-Honoré Fragonard. For example, he created the figure of Joan of Arc after these two drawings, or the lion basket. But Braccia-René was also able to create alone. He designed useful wares, such as this teapot with matching milk jug and sugar bowl, the elephant's heads of the handles of this ice pail, an enormous number of medallions and busts, and more ambitious pieces, such as a series of equestrian figures of French kings, and you see here Henry IV. He retired in 1823. His younger brother, Jean-Nicolas Alexandre, always called Alexandre Brachard, born in 1775, was only a repairer and never a designer. When a shape is simply called Brachard, it can only be by Braccia-René. Alexandre Brachard began to study sculpture in 1784, was paid from 1791 when he was 16 years old, and retired in 1826. A confusion comes from the fact that Alexandre Brachard marked the sculptures on which he worked by his initials, AB, in cursive capitals. But at least during his first years in Sèvres, Alexandre Brongniart put his visa on the sculptures before filing a very similar AB. So you can find twice the same letters or AB on the same sculpture, once for Alexandre Brongniart and once for Alexandre Brachard. If there is only one AB, you have to check with the ledgers noting the work of the repairers. But when drawings have the signature AB, it is always Alexandre Brongniart. We have been talking about Alexandre Évariste Fragonard, a very gifted artist, draughtsman, painter, lithographer, and designer. For Sèvres, he worked freelance from 1805 to 42, designing all sorts of shapes and decoration. He designed, for instance, the vase de la Renaissance you can see in the exhibition, sculpting himself all the figures. His son, Théophile Fragonard, was a painter, member of the staff of the manufacture from 1847 to 69. He painted, for instance, the round plaques on this piece of furniture now in the Louvre, conceived by Jules Père, where the biscuit figures were created by Jules Klagman. and Théophile's daughter, Léonie Fragonard, was also a painter in the manufacture from 1859 to 62, working mostly on copies of paintings by François Boucher during the revival of 18th century taste under the influence of Empress Eugénie. Then we come to the Régnier family. The father, Ferdinand Régnier, worked for Parisian producers of porcelain before coming to work in Sèvres from 1812 to 14, thanks to a special agreement with Brongniart. He designed, in 1813, these breakfast sets with reliefs, although the shapes were also used without the reliefs. Brongniart wrote about it. Almost all these pieces have been embellished with sculpture and ornamentation in relief that has not been much employed at Sèvres until now. But the development of execution processes has made it possible to have these pieces made less expensively and with a greater chance of success and perfection. And we can assume that these processes had been created by Ferdinand Régnier, who was a good technician. He left for 5 years because he was unhappy with the conditions offered by Brongniart and came back in 1820 to become first sculptor, molder, and thrower of large pieces, and then head of kilns and paste. To try to convince him to come back to Sèvres, Brongniart wrote to him, "You have given elsewhere proofs of your talent and of your means, thus I can expect that you will apply them usefully for the manufacture." Ferdinand Régnier created portrait bustes and medallions, several forms of useful wares, and translated in 3 dimensions the designs of other artists, for instance, the Déjeuner François Ier by Alexandre Évariste Fragonard. He also introduced new saggars with curved bottoms, allowing more secure piles in the kiln. He adapted to Sèvres special paste the jiggering process for producing flatwares, adopted systematically when King Louis-Philippe began ordering immense numbers of plates for his palaces in 1842. And he also adapted the process of including colored paste in the decoration of pieces, in imitation of what was then becoming famous and called Henri II ware, as you can see in this Coupe de Henri II. He retired in 1848. His son, Hyacinthe Régnier, was a modeler and sculptor from 1825 to 63. He worked with Alexandre Évariste Fragonard on his vase de la Renaissance, sculpting the ornaments while Fragonard sculpted the figures. Alone, he designed in 1832 the Déjeuner chinois réticulé, double-walled open-work Chinese tea set. The inspiration was probably a Chinese teapot with the same kind of work, bought by Brongniart for the Musée Céramique in 1826 at the sale of the collection of Chinese wares of Monsieur Salé. I am showing you the set here in the Metropolitan Museum, probably the one offered by the French state in 1874 to Marie, Princess of Edinburgh, daughter-in-law of Queen Victoria. Hyacinthe was clearly fascinated by these open-work pieces, since he designed a zarf and a pear-shaped vase with open work, and several other pieces with the same kind of work, his father helping for the production. He also designed plates with relief borders in the style of the Renaissance, and a great number of shapes for vases and useful wares, and even a piece of furniture, the jardinière de salon. After 1861, he only worked on pâte-sur-pâte decoration. Then we come to the Carrier-Belleuse family. The sculptor Albert Carrier-Belleuse was director of artworks from 1876 until his death in 1887. He designed a great number of vases, completely renewing this aspect of production. Some had sculpted details, such as the vase de la Fosse and its supporting figures, or the buire de Blois with sculpted handle and spout. It is here decorated by Suzanne Poil. But other shapes were smooth to give open space to decorators. Albert Carrier-Belleuse also designed new kinds of small objects, such as ashtrays and pin trays, and useful wares, such as the chimera breakfast set. These kinds of ornaments were criticized by the director of the manufacture, Charles Lotte, who asked the members of the advisory commission monitoring the production at Sèvres if they did not think that Carrier-Belleuse used too much of these sculpted ornaments. The members of the commission answered that they approved all the creations of Carrier-Belleuse, but the atmosphere in the manufacture must have been rather unpleasant. Lotte also criticized the choice of Rodin, a sculptor, and Carrier-Belleuse had to insist that Rodin was a very promising young artist. Carrier-Belleuse designed a lot of busts and several figures, among them a three-piece centerpiece on the theme of the hunt and a set for smokers, showing the relationships between tobacco and Egypt in France at the time. Albert's son-in-law, Joseph Chéret, was his help during his 2 last years before his death in 1887 and succeeded him as director of artworks. Joseph Chéret won several times the Prix de Sèvres, created by the Advisory Commission to bring new ideas in the manufacture, for instance, with the Jardinière de Table in 1882. After he left Sèvres, Joseph Chéret created several models for the manufacture, including this vase with masks. Albert Carrier-Belleuse's son Louis also won a Prix de Sèvres with this huge candelabra made in 1884. And another son, the painter Pierre Carrier-Belleuse, designed in 1908 a centerpiece showing ballet dancers translated in 3 dimensions by the sculptor Grégoire Calvet. The Gauvenet is the last family we will be looking at. The father, Jean-Baptiste Gauvenet, a sculptor who worked in Sèvres from 1908 to 1950, created these dancers in 1925 and several figures of animals. He also very regularly worked with the decorator Henri Rapin, adding geometrical low reliefs on vases and objects for lighting. His wife Geneviève was a decorator from 1921 to 24, and his son Alain Gauvenet was a modeler in Sèvres from 1950 to 68. He designed several breakfast sets and the Diane table service, very often used by artists invited to Sèvres in the 1970s and 80s because it offered plain surfaces. You see it here with decorations by the engraver James Guittet. I have been looking at sculptors and repairers, but of course the same kind of family relationships existed in all the workshops. We can think, for example, of the many painters of the Armand family, beginning with the 2 brothers, Louis-Denis Armand l'Aîné and Pierre-Louis-Philippe Armand le Jeune, or of the numerous gilders of the family of Leopold Weininger, who maddeningly used a very similar mark. About the sculptors and repairers, I must admit that I have carefully avoided talking about the Chanoux family. More than 20 members of the family worked in Sèvres over 4 generations. Most of them were repairers. Since they were often godfathers to their nephews, the same Christian names went from one branch to the next, and it was a nightmare to understand who was who, even with the parish register. Enough to say that a member of the last generation, one Henri Florentin Chanoux, came here to New York to open a manufacture of porcelain. Thank you.
After each talk, you can ask for a few questions. So Andrew will give you the mic and
I'll try.
If you have a question, please raise your hand. Sure, thank you.
I didn't hear.
Could you bring the mic a little closer to your
Ah,
mouth?
right.
Thank you. Any questions?
It was all so clear. Very well. Let's go on.
Oh, we actually have one here in the front.
So, how are you making all of the attributions? I mean, I'm sure that's probably a big question, but I mean, is every single piece marked with multiple little
Well,
initials or incisions, and then you're just
it's not
and
in
each
the-
is unique, and you're just tracing them? How are you accurately making the attribution?
for the person who designed the piece, we have all the records. So we know who designed what. Because since we belong to the state, we had to justify each money we spent. So we had to keep all the records. So we basically knew who designed. When it comes to who modeled a single piece, it's not so clear, but we still have the shaping registers. So more or less we can say who did what. And for sculptures, we have lists of what each sculptor did, mostly. So it's not that difficult.
And but did the archives also say where the piece ultimately went? I mean, it went into.
Well, the problem is if it was sold for cash, you don't know to whom. If it was sold to somebody with a name, we have the name.
So I have a question.
Mm?
Does he gave an advantage when you were son nephew to enter and to get the job at the manufactory, or did they have to go through the same process of the hiring process?
I don't know what the hiring process was, but obviously it helped because they had seen them from very young and they could see how promising they were. So it certainly helped. And also for not taking them. Yes.
Hi. Thank you. You mentioned that Sèvres has employed over 20 members of just one family across 4 generations. That's a beautiful thing. I'm curious to know, are there children today as interested in pursuing this, following their parents and ancestors' footsteps, or are they more interested in digital marketing these days? I'm curious to know.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Do the dynasties continue?
Are there
No,
children?
the Chanoux has left. No, I think the Gouvenet was one of the very last families, really. Jackie? Ah oui. Il y avait son père? Ah oui. So apparently there is still a dynasty, a father and son. I didn't know, but Trazik reminded me. So it does exist.
Any other questions? We'll go here and then to you.
Did the sculptor modeler control production all the way through, including use of gold in certain places, color, etc.?
Well, there was a head artist in charge of sculpture, and before a piece was fired, it had to be approved by the head artist, and he put his visa on the sculpture in the raw paste before it went to firing. So when it has the F of Falconet, we know the period when it was done, and that Falconet said, all right, you can fire it. Because you wouldn't use the wood of a firing for something that was not good.
Merci.
So there was a control.
Merci.
I'm curious to hear a little more about the role of women. You mentioned the daughter of Fragonard and another woman artist who decorated, which is painting. Was that unique or unusual,
No,
and did that change over time?
no, we had women working in Sèvres all the time. We had women painters since the 18th century and women repairers making flowers and working on the gilding. And in the 19th century, we had very famous painter on porcelain in charge of copying on big plaques the best paintings of the Renaissance and contemporary, because they knew that the paintings with oil on canvas would disappear because the prints had no colors, and the only thing that would resist was copying on porcelain with colors that wouldn't change. And then afterwards, we had women designing decorations, and we still have.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the origin of the famous Bleu de Sèvres, the famous blue that Sèvres is known for?
Well, it's the easiest color to make on porcelain, really. But the first, they tried, of course, to copy Chinese. And the Chinese, they knew they were blowing the color through a silk screen so that it would be in an uneven layer. They would put two or three, one on top of the other, so you could still feel the white of the porcelain. And this is what they tried to do, because they began by painting with a brush, and it's ugly because you see the brush strokes, and that's not what they wanted. So little by little, they managed to do it as we do it today in 3 layers, drying in the oven at a very low temperature between each layer. And they don't blow the color, but they pounce it with something, an unequal brush. And it's the same. What they want is the white to be felt through the blue. But we had several blues. So bleu de Sèvres doesn't mean anything, really. It's a 19th century invention, let's say.
All right. If there aren't any other questions, please join me in thanking Tamara.
You should tell us before the talk on when you cannot hear on the back. Tell us at the moment and not after the talk. Okay. Sorry if you didn't hear very well. So the next speaker is Viviane Mesqui, who belong to the new generation, I called, of scholar of 18th century Sèvres porcelain, and she began her career as a curator in 2016 at the Musée des Beaux-Arts d'Orléans, where she was responsible for the exhibition de Voué à Boucher au cœur de la collection Maté de Narbonne. Since 2018, she has been curator of 18th century European porcelain, earthenware, and glass at the Musée National de Céramique de Sèvres, where I had the privilege of working with her. She organized a fascinating exhibition during the turmoil of the COVID crisis entitled À table le repas tout un art, and that opened in 2021. And the following year, she brilliantly reinstalled a permanent collection of 18th century French porcelain in the museum galleries, while also reorganizing the museum's clutter storage. Passionate, dedicated, always working, she also made brilliant acquisition, published regularly scientific articles, and is a regular lecturer at the École du Louvre. Today, she will talk about what could happen at the Sèvres manufactory when suddenly you acquire for the museum a very unusual piece. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Charlotte. And before I begin, I would first like to thank Suzanne Weber for inviting me to participate in this symposium. I would also like to thank Tamara Préau and Soisy Guillemin for their continuing support. And last but not least, I am really grateful to the artisans of the manufactory, of the Sèvres manufactory, especially to Fabien Perronnet, I will talk about him a bit later, and to Antoine Delbis as well, who used to be the laboratory director. So in 2022, thanks to the energy of Charlotte Vignon as a director, the Musée National de Céramique in Sèvres acquired an exceptional pair of so-called beehive vases, vase ruche in French, which are presented as part of the Sèvres Extraordinaire exhibition. The model for these unique vases was designed around 1768-1769 under the direction of Jean-Jacques Bachelier, so the artistic director, but they were produced in soft base porcelain in the 70s at the Sèvres manufactory. These vases stand out for both their shape and their decoration, and I will show you how they constitute a real masterpiece of the 18th century sculpture. So their shape evokes the woven beehives that were in use during the 18th century for harvesting honey. So let me show you an example located in the Musée de l'Homme in Paris. These vases transform a modest agricultural instrument into a luxury object by changing the bell-shaped vase into an oval one and by creating a decorative object whose only decoration is gold, as you can see here on this detail. Following the beehive vases incorporation into the museum's collection in 2023, the Sèvres manufactory embarked upon the technical challenge of once again producing this model of vase that had not been produced at Sèvres since the late 18th century. And my presentation will, I hope, help you to understand why that was the case. So Tamara Préau herself told me that these vases are quite cheeky because of their audacity and their boldness that seems to ignore all technical constraints. So let me show you another view of these vases. But the Sèvres manufactory is not frightened by such challenges, and indeed, over the past few years, it has undertaken several rediscoveries of older, complex models, notably the recreation of its potpourri vase, called in French potpourri à vaisseau, in 2015-2016. The re-edition of the beehive vases thus continues Sèvres' long tradition of reproducing older models. So on this picture, you can see on the right the new edition of this potpourri à vaisseau. The model was the one located in the Louvre Museum. And on the left side, you can see Sylvie Ebrard, who is a painter in the Sèvres manufactory. She's actually doing the chinoiserie decoration on this picture. So re-editing an older model necessitates an intimate and technically precise familiarity with the concerned objects. Reproducing the beehive vases in the manufactory has revealed the secrets of their manufacture while also illustrating the exceptional dexterity of the 18th century artisans. And at the heart of this process, wax, in particular, played a decisive role. You will see that later. And actually, wax is certainly a well-suited material to the beehive vases. Thus, this recent re-edition has greatly improved our understanding of the beehive vases. Over and beyond the importance of re-editions for understanding our ancestral heritage, my presentation will evoke the exceptional artistic and heritage ecosystem, the only one I think that you can see anywhere in the world, still present in Sèvres. So here in this picture, you've got on the foreground the museum. Just behind you can see the manufactory, and another very important building is the red one at the back. There you can see the archives of the manufactory from the 18th century until today. Many models from all of this period, paintings as well, drawings, and a part of the porcelain manufactory collection as well. So Sèvres is a special place where the past serves the present, where heritage serves creations, and actually the museum's collections constitute a source of inspiration for both artists and artisans. And I like to show this typical example. You've got on the left a piece, an antique piece that was in the Dominique Vivant de Gnon collection, and then now into the museum collection, which inspired during the 19th century a new form produced in the Sèvres manufactory, vase grec à roulettes. So Sèvres is a place where the past serves the present, but it's also a place where the present serves the past and our heritage, and I will show you that now. So let us begin briefly considering the tradition of re-edition at Sèvres. The principle of a reproducible model is at the heart of the ceramic manufacturing process. Reproducible models allow the manufactory to not only satisfy the client's demand, but also to improve its productivity while reducing production costs and times. However, this principle of reproduction is not really in use during the early years of the Vincennes manufactory. The manufacturing process of three-dimensional sculptures by way of molding became systematic with the emergence of the biscuit porcelain technique, so around 1751, 1752. But this revolution did not only concern 3D sculpture. The molding process would also spread to encompass vessels that could not be turned, and notably the new models designed by Jean-Claude Duplessis. So production and its organization thus became normalized in the 50s with this process. So let me show you an example quite clear that you can see in the exhibition as well, from the drawing at the top here designed by Duplessis to the mold in plaster, and then to the translation in porcelain on the right, thanks to this molding process. In this process, plaster dominates for the production of models and molds. So I'm showing you here a view of today from this Atelier du Plat, so a casting throwing workshop. Actually, why do we use plaster? It's pretty logical, pretty simple. Plaster is hygroscopic and hygrophilic material. It's absorbing the humidity of the porcelain paste poured into the mold, thereby facilitating the later's removal. A manuscript, which is in the archives in Sèvres, dated 1755 by Jean Helot, the famous manufactory chemist in the middle of the 18th century, points out, and I'm going to quote partially what you can see here on the slide and to translate it, the molding of tableware such as plates, platers, is carried out in plaster molds produced under the supervision of Sieur Duplessis, who creates their designs, gives them their shapes. They are made of plaster because they imbibe the paste humidity. So in French we say, ils boivent l'humidité de la pâte. So it's really they drink the humidity. Monsieur de Fulvy had attempted to make them from bronze, so they would last longer. But as the metal cannot absorb the paste humidity, the mold could not be removed, while the saline wetness corroded the copper and stained the pieces. It's interesting to know that the bronze was abandoned actually, and plaster has the advantage of precisely imprinting designs upon porcelain, which is very important, as you can imagine by seeing this detail on the beehive vases. Since the 18th century, the various tools, such as models or molds, created during the process of manufacturing sculptures and other kind of pieces have been largely conserved by the manufactory. This today allows for new editions, for re-editing of older models. Terracotta, plaster models and molds allow for this reproduction, as do the porcelain pieces housed in the museum as well. So here I'm showing a view that you just showed before with Charlotte. It's a picture of the photo of the Magot, which is one of my favorite places in Sèvres actually, where we can find the plaster molds from the 18th century until today. And I wanted also to show an older picture of this Magot, just to remind how fragile is this heritage that many times in the history of the manufactory has suffered from destructions during the French Revolution, for example, or during the Second World War. And actually, in March 1942, there was a bombing just close to the manufactory that has destroyed many parts of the collection and of the buildings. And that is quite fortunate that a large number of molds have survived. These reeditions also constitute an opportunity for regular and instructive exchanges between the manufactory, the museum, and other departments in charge of the patrimony of the heritage collections in Sèvres, placed at the service of the manufactory. So I'm showing you here Pascal Louva, who is an artisan, a craftswoman, working in the Atelier du Moulage Reparage, so in English, the casting and resculpting workshop. She came to the museum to see two pieces of the 18th century showing the Mercury, the Mercure from Pigalle. Actually, the biscuit one is in the Sèvres Extraordinaire exhibition. And you've got the terracotta model here just behind. Both of these two pieces are in the museum's collection. So she came because she was doing a new edition of this model. And here we are in her workshop. On the table, you can see on the left the plaster model, which is also a source of inspiration for the repareurs and molders. And on the right, you can see the porcelain one. It has a light green-blue coloration that disappears after the firing process, and that helps modelers to see details more easily. And you can see as well a small textile on the porcelain figure. It's here to prevent, it's wet actually, and it's here to prevent from drying out too quickly. So the reediting and reproducible principle has therefore become essential in the very functioning of the manufactory since the 1750s. It must be pointed out as well that despite this process, each pieces remain unique. Indeed, after every mold removal, the piece's surface is reworked to erase seams or scars, like you can see here in this picture, and to make any necessary repairs and to add details. So also it's important to understand that each repairer has its own particular style to do these things. So here it's still Pascal Louva working on a model on a biscuit figure called L'amour Van Loo, so Van Loo Love, that was created in 1777 under the direction of Louis-Simon Boiseau. The re-edition tradition in Sèvres is also part of its artisans' training. The painter's apprenticeship begins with the reproductions of 18th century painted designs. So here it's a picture showing a painter in the manufactory just making a copy or a new interpretation as well of a gobelet enfoncé, which is in the museum's collection. So she's working on the flowers. And actually, flowers are very, very important. Flowers of the 18th century, I mean, for the training of the painters. And here, just a few words about the satin roses. We call them like that in the workshops in the manufactory because they are coming from a service that was made for the Comte of Sartine. You can see a piece of this service glass cooler located in the Sèvres Museum on the left. But actually, these roses, this kind of roses, were not only on this service during the 18th century, but these roses are very important for the training of the painter. As they explained me, they are one of the most complicated flowers and roses to paint because you have many different kinds of positions, orientations, construction actually, and lights on these flowers that are very complicated. And I'm showing a training on the right picture of Charlène Matteau, who is a painter in the manufactory, and she tried to dominate this kind of flowers here on this little essay. So a knowledge and mastery of 18th century models is an integral part of the artisan's training course. And here is an example for the 18th century sculpture. Florian Roux is a craftsman working in the Atelier du Polissage, the polishing workshop, as we need to polish biscuit after the firing process. And he's working on a new edition of a model that you can see in the Sèvres Extraordinaire exhibition. Actually, you've got an 18th century biscuit in this exhibition of this model he's working on. Re-edition at Sèvres thus serves commercial and educational processes, but they also serve conservation. For instance, in 1910, an extensive ensemble of re-edited biscuit pieces from the 18th century was produced and integrated into the Musée National de Céramique in order to fill in certain collection gaps. So here is the register located in the archives in Sèvres, biscuits of the 18th century, so the list of all of these reproductions from 18th century model that are now in the museum's collection. Those pieces were this time exhibited, but today they principally constitute a reserve collections, sometimes exhibited. For several museum favors presenting the originals of the 18th century model, opposed to its reeditions when it's possible. So here you've got a view of this storage, where there are 18th century models, but not only, and a detail of the two biscuits from the Série des Grands Hommes, so the Great Men series. So now I would like to demonstrate the manner in which reeditions constitute unique opportunity for the technical exploration of older pieces by considering in greater detail the beehive vases. Reeditions at the manufactory often necessitate specific research, notably when the older models or modes have not been conserved or have been altered. Such indeed was the case for the beehive vases. The manufactory teams then carry out research in collaboration with the Sèvres heritage departments, and they search through the museum's collections, through the drawings and designs of the models for answers to their question. So here, one more time, you can see Pascal Louvain on the left, but as well her colleague Johanna Caboret. Both of them are coming from the same workshop, Atelier du Moulage Reparage. And they came to the museum to see the 18th century examples of two biscuits, so the Mercure on the left and the bigger group called La Beauté couronnée par les grâces, so the beauty crowned by the graces. And they took many pictures and took a lot of time to observe them to be able to do a new edition of this model. I also like to show this picture of Tiffaine Leguet, who is the head of a small-scale casting workshop, so Atelier du Petit Collage in French, and she's observing pot à crème tête de vache, which is actually into the exhibition Sèvres Extraordinaire, so it's funny to see it like this. This piece was designed in 1816 by Alexandre Évariste Fragonard, and this example is dated 1834. And this reedition project is quite an incredible story because Tiffaine began to work on this reedition before the museum acquired this jug. In 2022, she had made many prototypes of this jug, and to work on that project, so she didn't have any porcelain example of the 19th century. She only had plaster models in bad condition and pictures from other crème jug. So she was so happy when she learned that we bought for the museum this cream jug, and when it arrived in the museum, we brought it to her to make comparison between her prototypes. You can see just on the table. This is the prototype she made before the arrival of the cream jug in the museum's collection, and she was not that happy to understand that she had to make new prototypes because there was many differences between them and the porcelain example of the 19th century. So these ambitious projects impose veritable technical explorations and constitute opportunity to rediscover techniques that may have been lost sometimes for little used, as in the case of the pot pourri vase, so the pot pourri à vaisseau, or that of the beehive vases. The case of the beehive vases well illustrates how the museum's current activities and explorations can be closely connected to those of the manufacturer's current production. For many years, a fruitful dialogue has been nourished by the museum's acquisitions, which have played an active role in the production of new reeditions. Each time, the older porcelain pieces are studied and analyzed by the manufacturer's artisans who seek to understand them. And each time, the questions arises as to the appropriate technique to use for creating those reeditions. For at Sèvres, as elsewhere, the particular techniques used have sometimes changed over time. So here another interesting example of a new recent reeditions of the Sucre Argonaut, which is also presented into the exhibition. And when it arrived into the museum's collection, the manufacturer decided to make a new edition of it. Fabien Perronnet is an artisan of the manufactory, produced the plaster model, and I will explain later in my presentation the role of this very important plaster model in making a new edition of this kind of object. Sorry. So the beehives vases acquisition played a decisive role in that. Thank you, Swazik. Setting out to reedit them. These vases are extremely complex from a technical standpoint, and their careful contemplation raised numerous questions and hypotheses. So, as to study these objects completely and to comprehend the process of their manufacture, the conservation team worked alongside with several workshops in the Sèvres manufactory. The different workshops, through their particular technical approaches, proved considerably helpful in understanding these pieces. This I touched upon in an article I published in 2022 in the revue de la Société des Amis du Musée National de Céramique. And this is the occasion to say that the Amis, the friends of the museum, played a very important role in the acquisition of this pair of vases. This technical exploration entered another phase with the project for re-editing the vases, begun in 2023, which allowed for a reassessment of the initial hypothesis evoked in the article published in 2022. The craftsmen in charge of the project have studied the vases in depth. The first certainty was that these vases were made by molding or stamping the paste of porcelain into a plaster mold. So on this picture, it's not for the beehive vases, but it's just to show how it happens when we introduce the paste of porcelain into a plaster mold to make a stamp. So to reproduce the beehive vases, the first step therefore consisted of creating a new plaster model, which is essential for the manufacturing process of molding vases. The plaster model is used to produce the plaster molds in which the porcelain paste is molded or stamped. These molds are made by creating an imprint upon the plaster model. You've got here the plaster model, the old plaster model of the 18th century for the beehive vases. New molds must be made, for the 18th century molds of the beehive vases have disappeared. The old plaster model you can see here, presented in the exhibition as well, was in two-pore shape to be used for numerous details had since disappeared. So, for example, at the top, it's not very good condition. The Sèvres workshop in charge of designing the new plaster model is the Sculpting and Modeling of Forms workshop, so the Atelier de Sculpture Modelage de Forme, which is directed by Fabien Perronnet. You can see him into his workshop, actually working on the new example of the plaster model of the beehive vases. For this task, Fabien Perronnet studied both the porcelain vases, so this new acquisition of the museum, and the former plaster model. He respected the particular craftsmanship and certain irregularities proper to the 18th century to create a new plaster model as close as possible to the original. So let me show you this new plaster model prepared for the new edition of the beehive vases. He also had to propose changes from the old plaster model, not only in order to adapt to today's paste, because we don't exactly use the same paste as in the 18th century, but also to adapt to technical evolutions as well since the 18th century. Indeed, during the 18th century, the beehive vases were stamped within molds fitted with several valves. This complex technique is less often used today, in the factory for this kind of pieces, perhaps to avoid what the chemist Jean Hello mentioned in his notebook. So this is the same source that I showed just before. He's saying that if the molded paste presented any imperfection, it's the workman who kneaded the paste who is to blame. It was also believed that a workman with bad breath never produced perfect pieces. So, in French, un ouvrier qui a l'haleine mauvaise ne livre jamais des pièces parfaites. While Hello is doubting that observation's veracity, he did underline that sweaty hands spoil the paste, so la sueur des mains gâte la pâte, and this is probably a reason why we don't use that technique that much. So in the first stage of the essay, this new edition, the paste for the new beehive vases will likely be cast rather than stamped within the contemporary mold at the Sèvres small-scale casting workshop. You've got a view of this atelier du petit collage in French from today. This means that the new vases could not be made in the exact same manner as in the 18th century predecessors. Another trial might consist of stamping, of course, in order to compare the two techniques and so to choose what is the best option, what is the best techniques we need to use today to continue for this project. Setting out to reedit these vases allowed us to take a more detailed look at their composition, to identify the technical obstacles confronting their 18th century artisans, and also to better comprehend their manufacturing process. Finally, I'd like to emphasize the importance of wax in the manufacturing process for the beehive vases. So beehive vases stand out for their complex surface work imitating woven wicker. This effect was created through stamping of porcelain paste within a precise mold imprinting the decorative wickerwork design. Subsequent to the mold's removal, if necessary, the surface could once again be reworked to rectify any imperfection. To define this complex woven design, the craftsman worked from a model that predates the plaster model you can see here, and which has not survived. So I'm not going to show it to you because it has not survived, but which is mirrored into the old plaster model presented in the exhibition and that you've got here. That first model, that original one, that initial model that has not survived, comprised a plaster body serving as a foundation, with its surface fully covered by the wax weave. So the vase's complex wickerwork design was first imprinted or molded upon wax. That particular material was chosen for its being wonderfully flexible and easy to shape and manipulate, imprinting without great difficulty complicated designs such as this undercut wickerwork motif. Then plaster imprints were made upon the wax cover model in order to create a mold. And into this mold, plaster was then poured to create the plaster model you've got here. The original wax-based designs were thus transferred to a plaster model that was easier to handle. The plaster model that has survived is thus the imprint of the lost original wax model, which did not survive because wax is really fragile and easily deformed. Taking a closer look at the old plaster model, which is in the exhibition, one can very well observe its memory of the earlier wax model. We can see, let me show you this picture, we can see marks left by tools or by impacts imprinted upon the wax by accident. Those old accidental marks are evident for their present rounded contours, characteristics of wax malleability and plasticity. So in this picture, you can see on the left, you've got the old plaster model held by Fabien Perronnet, and on the right, It's a material very close to wax that we use today in the manufactory, and he reproduced with his tools the same kind of accident in this material, just to make the comparison between the plaster model and the wax. Wax was used for it constituted the only available material allowing for such fine detailed work and for such a complex tangle of motifs in order to imitate woven wicker, so complicated to render in porcelain. Beside this use of wax, the work of the engravers, already touched upon by Antoine Delbis, played an essential role in defining this complex surface design. Following the wax phase, those artisans contributed to carving and refining the contoured hollows within the molds in which the porcelain paste was to be stamped. One must imagine that the interior of those molds created from the plaster model was reworked by the engravers in order to guarantee the greatest degree of detail. So here it's a detail of a big plan of the manufactory called Plan Général de la Manufacture Royale de Porcelaine de France. On this detail, you can see the place of the workshop for these engravers. So in the legend, we can see the Atelier des Graveurs en Plâtre, so the plasters engravers workshop number 30 and 31, which is located just next to the Cabinet Particulier du Sieur du Plessis, so just close to Duplessis, number 32. Following the porcelain paste removal from the mold, the repairers could set about repairing or refining the detailed work, but the greater the level of detail within the mold itself, the easier the subsequent work upon the porcelain, which is a quite difficult material to work upon and further shape. Wax had long been used to create metallic sculptures, as well as for designing models for complex patterns or design in the decorative arts. For wax is malleable, allowing for the definition of complicated and rich motifs. So let me show you a completely different kind of example. It's an armchair in wax, a very little armchair in wax. It's a model for an armchair commission for Marie Antoinette, the Queen Marie Antoinette, for the Pavillon du Belvédère at the Petit Trianon. A few rare, extraordinary and little-known models from the 18th and 19th centuries that have retained their wax-defined decorative designs are still housed in Sèvres. These plaster and wax models more directly mirrors the manufacturing process for the beehive vases. They are models for cups and saucers with wax-defined decorations for producing raised relief porcelain motifs. Indeed, such embossed designs justify the use of wax, as also in the case of the beehive vases. So here it's general view before dusting, because it's very dirty. And here are some details. So here is a gobelet à lait des Indes, deuxième grandeur, which is dated probably the end of the 18th century, and which is pretty impressive because the flowers and the branches are in very high relief, so it's quite impressive to see. So the red part is in wax. Here another example of a tasse litron bas-relief à guirlande, so with this guirlande of flowers with a lot of details. And I think this one is very interesting because if you have a close look, you can see there's plaster between the petals. So that's probably that shows probably the imprint made with plaster to realize a plaster model from this first model. And then another one, which is a gobelet à la bas-relief à guirlande, still with very precisely detailed flowers and on the gobelet. So wax, alongside plaster, has constituted an important material in the creation and production of Sèvres sculpture and for the beehive vases as well. So in conclusion, re-editions constitute an integral part of the manufacturing process at the Sèvres manufactory. Re-editions are also stimulated and renewed thanks to the close, intimate connections maintained with the manufacturer's older models, while heritage certainly serves this reproduction, the latter also prevents a rare opportunity to explore older, formerly manufactured pieces, as well as serving as a tool for better comprehending former manufacturing techniques. This dialogue, extremely stimulating for both manufacturing and understanding antique objects, is particularly dynamic at Sèvres and contributes to its exceptionalism. A one-of-a-kind site where historical and present-day heritage maintain a constant dialogue, serving creation and research. And to finish, I'd like to show this picture showing two pieces located in the museum. The first one here on the left is an English plaque of the 19th century, so not Sèvres porcelain, but it's in the collection. And people of the manufactory came to observe it and to help me to understand how particular and complex was the creation of this plaque, which will be presented in October in Sèvres because we're organizing a very nice exhibition from October 10. And on the right, you can see Sèvres vase made in the end of the 18th century, which is also in the Sèvres Museum's collection. And three women are here working in the Atelier du Brunissage. So they're working with gold, and they are here observing the vase to help me to understand how it was an extremely talented vase. So thanks to all of the people, I feel really grateful to them for that, because they help us and they help me to understand this kind of technical fits. And so I feel really grateful for that, and very lucky as well to work in Sèvres for all of these privileged moments to understand pieces. I thank you.
Again, we have time for questions. Oh, I see you right in the front.
Hi. Does the workshop also do repairs? I mean, if I have a very old piece in a museum and something happens, will you take care of it?
No, actually, the manufactory only product pieces only product pieces, but no restoration. And in Sèvres, we are very lucky because we have an atelier of restoration, a workshop of restoration, but which is connected to the museum. So that has nothing to do with the manufactory to repair the pieces in the museum. That was the meaning of the question?
No, so you do repair, I mean, something like Waterford will take your piece back and repair it.
I'm not sure to understand. Can you ask me? Okay.
I think it's very important to clarify there, and Vivian, you did very well. There is the manufacturer just work on creating new pieces. So they help understanding, but they create new pieces. But the museum is very fortunate to have a workshop, a restoration workshop, to restore the multiple ceramic, including Sèvres, that need the restoration. And of course, as much as possible, there is dialogue between the restorer and in the US, it's called a conservator. That's it. So between the conservator that work at the museum and the artisan that work in the manufacturing. But it's two different jobs. It's two different training. It's two different ethics. So they collaborate, but they don't separate.
It's not the same job.
Viviane, thank you very much. So the document of 1755 argued the merits of the plaster molds. When were the plaster molds actually first instituted within the manufacture?
Or maybe Tamara would be more precise than me. What I've explained in my presentation is that the molding process with plaster was used from the beginning of the 50s, when the biscuit production was introduced 1751, 1752, so in the middle of the 18th century. But for example, when we used to be in the Vincennes porcelain manufactory, we didn't use that much, I think. And the molding process became more usual during the 50s, 1750s. Is that? Ah.
Hi.
My question was regarding this piece and the original mold. Do we know how the first mold was made? Was it from a sculpture or was it actually molded from one of these baskets that you showed us?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The
I think
original
Oui.
mold, the old mold that you showed us for this piece.
Yes, okay. The
Well,
model you
how
mean
was
the
it produced initially? Was it from a clay sculpture or was it molded from an existing object?
both techniques actually. You need to create the base with the mold and then the wax thing, because the first original model was the structure in plaster, and then they added wax, so the wax was worked with by hand as well.
Right.
First you create a little, as Fabien Perronnet did actually for the new plaster model. You make it's
I'm not talking about the new one. I'm talking about like before they made that first mold. I don't know
Yes.
when it was, like 17th century or something.
They had to define the new structure by hand, and then they made a print to
Right.
reproduce it on a larger
So it was
place.
like engraved in clay? Is it like a clay object?
No, with wax. They used wax actually to work. Absolutely.
The whole object in
Yes,
wax?
absolutely. Absolutely. No.
Oh, wow. So it's really hard. Oh, yeah, I guess they sculpt in the wax.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, like carving.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
very interesting. Okay.
And this has not survived. So it's what I show with that wax is very precious.
Hi, I'm just wondering, what are some of the criteria by which the historic models are selected for reproduction today? Is it the choice of the artist, or is it a matter of recovering lost techniques? How do you decide which will be reproduced?
So why we are making a new edition? It's every time I think different. Sometimes we are it's the initiative of the artisans from manufactory to propose new models. For example, they goes into the archives, find new interesting models, and propose to our commercial service new models. For example, sometimes it's someone who wants a new edition of an old model, a client who is at the origin of these new editions. So there are several situation, and sometimes it comes really from the our direction actually, because they want to make a very big challenge, such as for the potpourri abesso, for example. It was a big challenge that the manufacturer wanted to do. So it comes from different origins actually. And sometimes, as you've seen in my presentation, new acquisitions of the museum, for example, such as the Sucre Argonaut, gave the idea of the to the manufacturer to make a new edition of this exceptional object. It depends.
Hi, hello. Could you speak to the development of the color palette of Sèvres, specifically thinking about the hot pinks and turquoises, which are so brilliant and rare?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure. You want me to talk about color, but I've not understand everything.
The color palette.
The color palette.
Yeah.
When exactly how were they developing that, and did they start out with maybe just blue and white and then so on?
Oh, many colors. Okay. The older examples of palettes are, for example, Goblet palettes. That we have two examples of them in the museum's collections, dated from the end of the 40s, 1740s. So it's very old, and actually palettes are still used today. So it's permanent in the history of the manufactory, and palettes in form of a goblet or of sometimes we've got palettes on plates, for example, or on plaques, are a tool for the artisans to make repairs to realize their decoration. Because when you are a painter in the manufactory, you have to be aware of the fact that what you paint, which is not fired, has not the same color than when it has passed the firing process. So this palette helps them to choose the right colors to make their composition, and each painters use his palette. And when you come into the manufactory, you begin by making these kinds of tools. Was it clear?
Thank you.
Yes, hi. I wonder how the new technologies are like
scanning or 3D printing is impacting the way like someone like Fabien Perronnet is working?
It's Sèvres is a very rare place. I mean, where industrial techniques, for example, are not existed. We are very traditional processes that allow us to make exceptional pieces, actually. And it's not that we are against modernity, but it doesn't allow the same kind of excellence and the same kind of marvelous objects. So we don't use this kind of tools in the manufactory. And your question is interesting because Fabien Perronnet, who is maybe he arrived maybe 30 years ago in the manufactory, he's training new craftswomen, young craftsmen and women, and he told me, it's fascinating. They are all working with computers to imagine their models, but it takes a lot of time, and they are not able to sometimes to feel the paste, to feel the real paste. And these kind of tools, he told me, doesn't really help to produce an exceptional porcelain because it creates a disconnection with the real material. So it's why there's still in every atelier actually makes all of the steps to create porcelain, exceptional porcelains. So it's why Sèvres Extraordinaire, actually.
Great. So we're going to take a break now until, yes, please join me in thanking Viviane.
We have 3 more fascinating lecture. So it's also time for the coffee will stay outside. So really, if you're really tired, you can grab a cup of coffee during the second half, and also reception after the symposium. So you will be able to continue your conversation. So it's time for me to introduce Linda Roth, who is the Charles C. and Eleanor Lamont Cunningham Curator of European Decorative Art at Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art. Linda holds a BA from Bowdoin College, and an MA from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. At the Wadsworth Atheneum, she organized multiple exhibitions and gallery installation. And for a 40th anniversary at the museum, she curated a remarkable exhibition on the collector J.P. Morgan. A scholarship and publication focus on European decorative arts, especially in the field of ceramic, as well as on the history of collecting. And for some time now, she has focused our attention on the great French ceramist Taxil Douat, and it's the subject of her talk today. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Susan, Charlotte, Andrew, for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor to be part of this symposium that celebrates Sèvres Extraordinaire, curated by Charlotte, and of course Tamara Préau, who's been a mentor, friend, and endless source of knowledge and assistance to me and countless other scholars and researchers for almost 4 decades. This afternoon, I'd like to explore with you some aspects of the work of a French late 19th and early 20th century ceramist, Taxil Douat, who captured my imagination several years ago and continues to intrigue me to this day. Douat will be the subject of a book and exhibition at the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art in Hartford in 2027. The drawing of the kiln is the time of great excitement for ceramists. The fever which has taken hold of them during the preparation of art pieces grows with the progress of the work to reach its climax during the drawing, which is the best lesson for future work as well as a succession of childish joys and disappointments. Taxil Maxime Douat wrote these words in a treatise on high-fired ceramics called Grand Feu that he published first in 1903 as a series of articles in both the French journal Art et Décoration and the American journal Ceramic Studio, and then under separate cover in 1905. Born in 1851 in Albi, France, northeast of Toulouse, Doat was college educated and then worked for the French Post and Telegraph Service, first in Rennes and then in Limoges. He may have become interested in ceramics in Limoges, where he would study ceramic making at the École du Boucher. In 1875, Doat left Post and Telegraphs and moved to Paris, where he entered the studio of the sculptor Augustin Dumont. Dumont came from a family of sculptors and taught at the École des Beaux-Arts from 1853 until his death in 1884. His work ranged from large-scale public sculptures to small-scale medals, the latter likely having influenced Doat's work, as you'll see later. Doat's work at this early period was primarily in a technique called either pâte d'application, pâte rapportée, but now generally referred to as pâte sur pâte, literally paste on paste, a complex, time-consuming process that results in a translucent cameo-like design. Doat refers to this method in grand feu, quote, "When the design has been traced over the colored slip, either with a pencil or a pouncer, it is covered with slips of white paste laid in successive coats and of different thicknesses, according to the effects to be obtained." The method was invented at the Sèvres porcelain factory and brought to perfection around 1850. This plaque, made in 1875 on the left, shows that at this early stage in his career, Doat had already mastered the pâte sur pâte technique, which he must have learned in Limoges, and for which he became best known. Doat joined the Sèvres porcelain factory as a sculptor in 1877, though he did not give up his own independent production. He remained there until his retirement in 1905. From 1909 to 1914, he was in St. Louis, Missouri, to direct the ceramics division in the newly established Art Academy of the American Women's League. Doat taught and made porcelain at the Academy until it folded in 1911, and then reorganized the pottery works, called University City Pottery, and ran it from 1912 to 1914, after which he returned to France. His St. Louis years are beyond the scope of this talk. As we saw in the last slide, at the time of his joining Sèvres, Doat was already an accomplished ceramic artist. And that's quite evident in this elaborately decorated vase from 1877, just 2 years later, with pâte sur pâte figures of Ceres and Ariadne. The vase was so highly regarded that it was exhibited in the Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1878 and subsequently presented to the British government, and it's now at the V&A. Doat would embrace a wide variety of motifs in his pâte sur pâte work, both at Sèvres and in his studio production. These included classical mythology, allegories, pastoral scenes, and commemorative imagery, often in the form of medallions. These were his original designs, as will become apparent shortly. The decorative scheme of the plate on the right features the theme of music. Sainte Cécile, the patron saint of music, is depicted in the central roundel, and additional small roundels with musical motifs surround the central scene. In the center of the slide, you can see how Doat signed his work at the factory. And you can see here, either with a monogram or his last name with his monogram incorporated. It is noteworthy and I think unusual that he signed his factory work in the decoration, and I don't think that most of his fellow decorators did that. Doat's pâte sur pâte decoration shows a clear debt to an earlier pâte sur pâte master, Marc-Louis Emmanuel Solon, the most renowned practitioner of this technique, who worked at Sèvres and then at Minton's in Staffordshire, England. On the right is a Solon Sèvres vase at the Wadsworth Athenaeum, which he decorated in 1869, just before he left for England. Like much of Solon's work, it features Venus and Cupid, characters that Doat will use both in his work for Sèvres and even more frequently in his studio production. Doat also used colored slips, as well as white ones, in his decorative work at Sèvres. He built up his designs using very thick slip made from the colored porcelain of the body, it was called pâte colorée, to give a more subtle monochrome effect than when the white slip was layered over a dark ground. You can see this technique on a yellow ground vase at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs called Cicadas and Ants, where he even used slip to decorate the inside of the neck, in this case using white slip on the white ground of the interior to create a beautiful lacy pattern. On this vase d'Angers on the right, with the theme of winter from 1901, he used colored slip for the overall ornament and white slip on a darker ground for the figural medallions. Doat often enhanced his pot coloré designs by defining the contours using incised lines. You can see this on his vase Stephanus from 1889 on the left. The technique was pioneered by sculptor Auguste Rodin, who worked part-time for the Sèvres factory from 1879 until 1882, supplying models and working as a pat-sur-pat artist. You can see one of his vases on the second floor of this exhibition. Rodin was trained in the technique by Doat, but revised it by adding this type of incised line, and it really made it a bit of a difference in the overall aesthetic and sense of the design on these pieces. Doat was able to achieve very complex designs and imagery using this combination of pot coloré and incised decoration. On the left and center is his Vase de Noville, the Warrior Ride of 1889, and on the right a Vase Bouillon of 1894, called in the archives Depuis Opime, which is an ancient Roman subject referring to the spoils of war. This combination of techniques, which, quote, formed a perfect entity, very rich and very agreeable to the eye, end quote, was remarked upon in the official French report of the World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago in 1893. The Vase de Noville in the previous slide was illustrated in the May 1889 Pottery Gazette about the Paris Exposition Universelle of that year. Doat had created the composition sometime in the 1880s for an as yet unidentified project. You can see his meticulous pen and ink drawing in the center of the screen. He repeats part of the same composition on a trial Sèvres plaque, also from 1889, again using a combination of pot coloré and engraving. The relief decoration was enhanced by incising the contours and then applying a translucent colored glaze that pooled in the crevices. And I think, just to point out, here's the figure of the Cupid or child riding the horse. This is his drawing of sometime in the 1880s. And then the Sèvres porcelain plaque with this same image on the right. In his treatise Grand Feu, Doat wrote, "To Sèvres and to my comrades, I owe all my technical skill and the greater part of my art." Throughout the 1880s, Doat worked simultaneously in his own studio and at the Sèvres factory, with frequent overlaps in style, as you can see in the works on the screen. He had been experimenting heavily during this period, using a small coal-burning updraft kiln in his studio, which at the time was located in Paris. Doat wrote that he had to learn everything about working with fire through trial and error because he didn't learn this at Sèvres. Quote, "For though in the center of the Sèvres establishment, I was confined to decorative work and paralyzed by the everybody in his place rule of large manufacturing centers." Doat had an opinion about a lot of things. To that end, around 1892, Doat moved his studio, which he called Villa Kaolin, three quarters of a mile from the Sèvres factory, and built a large downdraft wood-burning kiln. Speaking of this in Grand Feu, he wrote, "But as I was unable to resist the passion of a ceramist, and as a ceramist does not exist without his kiln, any more than a violinist without his violin, I have established at my residence an experimental laboratory where I win from the fire the wares which have brought me a gratifying success." Doat marked the work made in his studio with his name, which incorporated his monogram, usually the date of the piece, and the word Sèvres, which refers to the location of the studio, not the Sèvres porcelain factory. Whether he kind of wanted to play on that? But whatever, there's a lot of confusion still about this, and you can find evidence of that as you go through museum websites and see how many of his studio works are attributed to the Sèvres factory. So it's still not sorted out. One of the notable aspects of Doat's decoration was his use of cameo-like heads for both his work at Sèvres and his studio production. On the left is a large vase measuring just over 26 inches, featuring cameo heads a la antique, representing the industrial arts. In the Sèvres archive, the vase is called La Céramique. Each head has an inscription: Meuble, Céramique, Verrerie, Orfèvrerie, and Émaux. 4 years later, Doat used the same type of imagery to decorate one of his studio works, a large stoneware charger, examples of which are in the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Lille and with a Paris dealer. He even repeated one of the heads on the Sèvres vase, the head representing Meuble, seen here, is the same as the head called Les Tissus on the charger. Doat's cameo heads and medallions can be linked to the long-standing artistic tradition of bronze sculptural medals. In the case of his porcelain medal celebrating the French Republic on the left, he actually copied a bronze medal by Jean-Baptiste Daniel Dupuy that had been made for the 1889 Exposition Universelle in Paris, paying homage to Daniel Dupuy by inscribing his name under the word République. Doat must have been familiar with this art form from at least his days in the Dumont studio when he first arrived in Paris. Doat's use of cameo heads resulted in a series of innovative paperweights with subjects including la mer, the sea, pomone, bellum, which means war, rebours, which means strength, la neige, the snow, printemps, spring, and flora. And I think there are a couple of others. He made these in multiples, as you can see with la mer on the left top and bottom, but each time with different glazing. In 1900, the potter Louis F. Day wrote in the Art Journal of Doat's, quote, delightful medallions, not simply in white upon a colored ground, but with such variations of color as you may find in a shell or onyx cameo. With this comment, Day recognizes another source of inspiration for Doat, the ancient arts of cameo carving. As early as the 1880s, Doat was designing allegorical medallions, as you can see from this drawing on the right, with the inscription Matribus detestatum bellum, mothers detest war. These works at the Wadsworth all mothers detest war. More mothers should detest war. These works at the Wadsworth Atheneum reflect just some of the variety of Doat's production and more evidence of his talent as a sculptor, in the broadest sense of the word. The plaque on the left, with a medallion probably depicting Athena, typifies his pairing of luscious, high-fired glazes with cameos. The corn vase is one of the most inventive compositions, in which he animates the natural form of corn cob in a husk to become a vessel, and then ornaments it with pat sur pat medallions showing the sowing and harvesting of corn. The gourd vase, with its rich flowing glaze, exemplifies the way in which Doat pushed forward the boundaries of ceramic art while still paying homage to the past. Like the corn vase, he adorns his vessel with hanging pendants, this time decorated with figures of Venus and Cupid holding theatrical masks. The late vase on the right, while unadorned with relief sculpture, is punctuated by ornamental bosses, to my surprise, very similar to those on this grand vase de Sens that's upstairs in the exhibition, and topped with a beautiful sculptural knop in the form of a spiraling shell. Doat created the shape as early as 1900, when he exhibited one with much more two-dimensional decoration at the Exposition Universelle in Paris. Doat's inventive sculptural decoration and sense of humor is on show in this brown plaque with a blue and white central medallion, depicting Cupid sticking his foot through the mouth of an oversized theatrical mask. Doat invented this image in the 1880s, evident in another one of his remarkable drawings. The composition is part of a larger sheet with 3 other rectangular designs, not shown here. One with the Latin inscription, Castigat ridendo moris, which means one corrects customs by laughing at them. The phrase was associated in the 17th century with comedy or satire, and that I think helps to explain the iconography of the Cupid and mask. But the visual convention goes back to antiquity and depictions of children putting their hands, not their legs, not their feet, through the mask of Silenus. Examples are found in Roman sarcophagi and repeated by later artists, including Nicolas Poussin and, as you see here, Stefano della Bella, who copied a Hellenistic sculpture of that model that's now in Chicago. And this is a print from around 1660. I know of 2 other Doat plates with this cameo, one in the Dresden porcelain collection and the other one in Copenhagen. We have just seen with the paperweights and the plaque with the mask that Doat made several examples of the same model, often year after year. This bottle in the shape of a leather wine flask is another instance of his repetition. The model, one of several gourd-shaped pieces that Doat designed, shows a love of nature along with a sense of whimsy, which typifies much of his work. Doat took the composition of one of the Patserpat scenes on his wine flask bottle from a Sèvres plate, which he decorated in 1901. And it's right here. Close examination of the decoration of these bottles and most of his studio work with cameo decorations reveal a remarkable consistency when it comes to the Patserpat plaques. At the Sèvres factory, such decoration was all created by hand. But close examination of his studio work shows that he used molds to create his version of Patserpat. In the case of the vessels, I believe that he would paint the white porcelain slip into the relief cavities in the mold. Then, after letting it dry, add 1 or 2 other layers of colored slip, and then slip cast them to create the body, which would adhere to the painted slip to create a seamless look. He could then add subtle details once the work was unmolded. In the case of these bottles, and I'm going to go back, you can see that he varied where he applied the green and brown slips behind the molded Patserpat designs. So, for example, here he's got brown slip, here he's got a celadon slip, and he adds the green is here on this bottle, but it's not here on this bottle, but it is here on this bottle. But the molded decoration on all of these is exactly the same, and that molded decoration includes all of these areas, including up here. By having the relief already created in the mold, he would only need 1 layer of white slip to create the dimension and the cameo look, another to create a contrasting background, this green or this brown, and a third, in this case, to suggest the leather embellishments of a wine flask bottle. And all of this would save a great deal of time. Doat wrote that he decided to adopt slip casting, quote, so as to obtain results more easily and surely. It is well suited to the work of individual artists because it does not necessitate an expensive outlay and presents no serious difficulties. Doat would have seen how relief decoration could be made by slip casting when he was working at Sèvres. As Thomas Préau notes in the catalog of this exhibition, an 1850 report on new productions highlighted improvements in slip casting techniques that permitted production of very thin works and large pieces, decorating with reliefs requiring little reworking. You can see an example of this technique in the elaborately decorated vase by Klagman from 1848 on the left and on the second floor of the exhibition. On the right is the plaster model made from Rodin's design for the centaurs, from which Sèvres slip cast many examples, including the yellow vase that I showed earlier, and a 1901 example now in the museum in Lille. So this slip casting for relief decoration was something that he would have taken with him from Sèvres. Again, at first sight, this charger appears to combine molded decoration with applied pâte sur pâte. But like the gourd vases, Doat has used molds for even the pâte sur pâte decoration. This is evident when you see an unglazed example of the same charger with no slip direct decoration or glaze, which may be a trial casting as it was sold directly from his studio a few years ago. Comparing the two, they all have the same motifs, including in detail the figures inside the cartouches, all made in the mold. But in the case of this large charger, which is 17 inches in diameter and made from stoneware, not porcelain, Doat would have used the press mold process. A plaster mold was placed on the wheel. The white slip and then background color slip was placed in succession in the cavities of the relief decoration, and then a slab of stoneware pressed into it. The underside of the plate was then cut with a jigger to create the profile of the foot. The glazes were added with brushes after the piece was baked, which is called the dégourdi firing. I hope I've got that right. Before it was high fired. The model of this charger was called les baisers, or the kissers. The Metropolitan's plate on the left was so unusual that it caught the attention of William P. Jervis when he wrote his Encyclopedia of Ceramics in 1902, shortly after the plate was made. He describes it as made of, quote, kaolinic stoneware with a decoration in white porcelain on emerald green, noting that Doat profits, quote, in his decorations from the incontestable effects of the strength and solidity of stoneware to enhance the delicacy and brilliance of his cameos in porcelain. It's highly unlikely that Jervis knew that Doat created the cameos in the mold. This charger indeed shows one of Doat's signature accomplishments, which was combining porcelain, the slip decoration in the cartouches, and stoneware in the same piece. He did this by adopting a new porcelain paste called pâte nouvelle, developed at the Sèvres factory in 1884, and I think there's a text about it in the exhibition, as well as the fine-grained kaolinic stoneware paste called grès, also developed at Sèvres. The new porcelain paste was fired 100 degrees cooler than the hard paste porcelain. And Sèvres stoneware was, in Doat's words, quote, as close as possible to the new porcelain, so that pieces can be made of grès and porcelain combined. Its constitution also allows it to receive, with good results, all the colored glazes which had been previously created for the new porcelain. It will fire at the same temperature, at the same cone, and pieces of both materials can be placed side by side in the same sagger, the ceramic container that protects objects in the kiln. It can be treated with the same glazes and the same processes of decoration, and from a ceramic standpoint, excels porcelain in the point of the fabrication of large-size pieces. As we've seen, Doat was able to repeat designs using molds, but he then transformed them by using different glazes. Here are 3 examples of another large stoneware charger where he achieved markedly different results by his bold and inventive glazing. And as you can see in this slide, every element of the relief decoration is the same. And while it's not readily apparent in the slides, when you look at these reliefs in person, the contours do look different than those made with traditional pâte sur pâte applied decoration. I've talked about Taxil Doat as a studio potter, and that term is often interpreted as someone who works exclusively by hand. But it's important to note that molds were made by many other studio potters, and that these artists had to be able to make a living. Doat must have been interested in time-saving techniques, especially when he was still working at Sèvres and had relatively leisure time to do his own work, although this is in spite of his frequent absences, but that's a whole nother story. So it only makes sense that he would try to streamline the pâte sur pâte process. As I hope you've now seen, Taxil Doat was a gifted ceramist and sculptor who passionately embraced and advanced his art. He experimented widely with materials and techniques, learning much from Sèvres. This included how to maximize the potential of the mold, and in fact taking that a step further by molding his pâte sur pâte plaques. Doat straddled the worlds of the factory potter and the studio potter, taking the best from both of them. He shared much of what he learned with his fellow, often aspiring potters through his publication Grand Feu, and with his students and colleagues in St. Louis. His work invites still greater scrutiny, and in turn promises great rewards, all of which will result in the Wadsworth Athenaeum's 2027 book and exhibition. So I thought I would close with some of Doat's own words, written in the final pages of Grand Feu. I have now reached the end of my story, which it is earnestly hoped will contribute to the advancement of the potter's art. This art is a part of human attainments which ennoble man, are necessary to him, and which permanently perpetuate the history of humanity. It is from the fragments of the potter's works, found in the ruins of ancient civilizations, that human evolution is constructed. Thank you.
We have time for some questions.
That was great. Thank you. So I noted that the acquisition of the corn vase was 2024, and then you referenced that one other piece was purchased out of his estate just a few years prior. So was that out of his estate, the corn vase? And what is the size of it?
The corn vase is, I don't have the, it's not large. It's like 10 inches. I've forgotten now. So the corn vase's history is interesting. I actually cut some of that out of the talk in the interest of time. So when Taxil Doat went to St. Louis in 1909, he brought 174 pieces of his work from his studio. And the collection ended up being purchased by the St. Louis Art Museum and accessioned in 1911. But in 1945, in their infinite wisdom, they deaccessioned all but 14 pieces. And they sold them through auction, through a New York auction / department store. I really don't understand how they sold them yet. And so there have been a lot of things that have filtered onto the market, and that's where the corn vase came from. In terms of the unglazed piece, his studio and house are still occupied by a woman who's lived there since she was 5 years old. And apparently when she moved in, where her family moved in after his death, there were his archives were there, a lot of works were there. And I think starting in the 1970s, things started to be sold from the house. And sometime in the last 4 or 5 years, that unglazed dish came on the auction market in Paris, and I'm 99.9% sure it would have come out of his house. So, don't know yet.
Great. Any other questions? One and then the other.
You mentioned all the pieces that were brought to St. Louis. Is there a sense of, total number of pieces that he actually made in his studio outside of that?
I have not tried. He was very prolific. I think if you even just monitor the auction market in the last 10 years, and then start looking through collections all over Europe and the United States, he was very prolific. So I don't have a sense of how much.
Is there in existence any correspondence between Solon and Doat, or were they? Did they ever get to hang out, or?
No, I don't think they didn't overlap. So Solon was already in England when Doat came. There is correspondence between Doat and Rodin in the Rodin Museum archives, I believe. And they actually shared a studio, I believe, maybe. And then I think they kept in contact. They were friends. But I don't know of any. But I think in the article, there are articles that Solon wrote in the beginning of the 20th century. I would have to, and I think that he actually references Doat and Pot-sur-Pot, but I don't want to say 100% that that's true.
Any other questions?
There's somebody in the way back, Andrew.
Thank you. I think I heard you use the phrase favril. Okay, because I only know of that as Tiffany glass. But
I know, no, I didn't use that phrase.
Sorry.
Do I see another question over here? There you are.
Excuse me. Thanks,
Be
Linda.
kind to me, Sequoia.
No, super kind. I'm curious if you could speak to, or if you have any ideas about why he wrote, actually, and like how writing fit into his
How
work.
what?
How he wrote, or why he wrote his book. What role did writing play in his work?
To be honest, he first did it in a series of articles in France, and then the Robineaus picked it up and published it, and they translated them and then published them in Ceramic Studio. I keep thinking that he was a bit of a self-promoter. And so I don't know how much of that was self-promotion and how much of it was really trying to disseminate knowledge. One of my big questions is, and this is all, part of the bigger project, he leaves the Sèvres factory in 1905 because they figured out a way to forcibly retire him by counting his work, the time that he spent in the Post and Telegraphs as part of his government service, so that it would enable him to get the pension, so that it would convince him that he needed to leave. And my understanding from correspondence or from his personnel file is that they were pretty annoyed with Grand Feu. Because in the Grand Feu, he talks about their Sèvres pastes and he gives formulas for all their stuff. But what I didn't understand, and what I was going to actually ask Tamara probably over dinner at some point soon, is if the Sèvres factory was mandated to share their technical knowledge with other ceramic, I guess that did not include getting it out into the general public, and that still annoyed them, even though that it must not have been terribly secretive if they were sort of right. Stay in, but not to the general. I mean, why would they have gotten so mad at him? Right. So he did that, but then he got in trouble. So it's just kind of interesting. So I don't really know. I don't know how much altruism was involved and how much being paid to. I assume that the Robineaus paid him to publish it, and they then published the book version of it. So he's a fascinating character.
Thank you. I so enjoyed this. I love his stuff, and he's a great character. Is your exhibition going to travel down?
To be determined.
Well, Bard.
Well, Bard's a little close to Hartford, so I'm not so sure. But Susan and I have actually had some interesting conversations about possible collaborations. So, but stay tuned.
And with that, please join me in thanking Linda.
Soazie Guillemin is our next speaker, and she has been the head of the register department at Sèvres Manufactory et Musées Nationaux since 2010. In this capacity, she oversees the long-term loans of the manufactory, as well as all the external loans from the National Museum of Ceramic at Sèvres. It's a particularly exciting role, I think, as she oversees especially the 250,000 Sèvres porcelains placed over time in various Republican institutions, like the Élysée Palace, l'Assemblée Nationale, l'Hôtel de Matignon, where lived France's Prime Minister, as well as French embassy abroad. When we worked together at Sèvres, she spent most of her time at the Élysée Palace, of course when the president was not there, inventorying the collection of Sèvres porcelain. This role gave her a unique access and knowledge of and to the production of the manufactory and also how this manufactory functioned. So Aziz is graduated from the prestigious École du Louvre, where a master dissertation focused on the designer and French ceramic manufacturer from 1950 to the present day. I mean, I think it was present day when you did it. She regularly published on the rich collection and history of the Sèvres manufacture and museum, and she will talk today on the art of light and sculpture at Sèvres. And of course, and I forget to say that, of course, she is also one of the curators of the exhibition.
I would like to begin by extending my gratitude to Suzanne Weber for a decision to undertake this project. Thank you so much. I would like also express my gratitude to Tamara Préau and Charlotte Vignon for their invaluable collaboration. And finally, I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues that are here today for their invaluable also and enthusiastic assistance in this project in Sèvres. Thank you. So, okay. Yep. Let's begin. From its inception, the Manufacture de Sèvres that became the Manufacture de Vincennes that became Manufacture de Sèvres in 1756 has been engaged in the production of candle holders, light arms, candlesticks, torches, and light lights. These utilitarian objects were also crafted with great care into decorative pieces. The company has continued to produce items from the home over the centuries with different styles and artist decorating items for use in the home, including ceremonial tables, dressing tables, and beside tables. While sculpture employs the manipulation of light to accentuate its intrinsic forms, the interdependence between the two elements has, on occasion, been inverted in the creation of the Sèvres manufactory. The unceasing interplay is concomitant with the examination of the object's function and its aesthetic attributes, a pervasive theme within the domain of decorative arts, as you know. In the present discussion, we will examine the manner in which the Sèvres manufactory and its collaborating artists have responded to this implicit question over time. The earliest known examples of candlesticks date to 1751, and they are referenced in the historical records as bougeoir or bougeoir ordinaire. The item in question dates from 1753. As can be observed from this period onwards, sculpture contributed to the enhancement of the object design. The camailleux decoration is a hallmark of this period. Jean-Claude Duplessis, a bronze maker, was a pivotal figure in Sèvres production during era. As Tamara Préau mentioned a few moments ago, he was engaged by Sèvres to create novel forms, including vases, tablewares, and lighting in the Rococo style, some of which will be presented below. In the 1760s and 1770s, the Sèvres manufactory consistently introduced products with new forms, new type of decoration, and even new functions. Until that time, sconces of high quality were made either of gilt bronze or gilt wood. It was significant technical achievement to produce them in porcelain, a small firing cracks on this object in the area where the porcelain curves testifies to the difficulty involved. Perhaps the challenges in molding and firing porcelain sconces explain why about 20 were made at Sèvres between 1761 and 1768, the period during which these objects would have been in fashion. They were clearly held in high esteem. Louis XV acquired at least 10 with a green ground in 1762. And Madame de Pompadour had a pair in pink, green, and blue in the bedroom of her Paris townhouse, the Hôtel d'Evreux, now Élysée Palace. And another pair in green was in her Grand Cabinet at the Château de Ménard. This shape was first made in 1756. This year was marked by the introduction of several ambitious shapes. Animals, such elephants and monkeys, appeals to the Rococo taste for exoticism, but it isn't clear whether the idea to incorporate elephant heads on this candelabrum came from an oriental object or was inspired by their appearance in porcelain made by other European manufactories, for example, by Meissen. Presumably, due to the technical challenges and cost of making these vases, few were produced in Sèvres, all of which date to the years around 1760. Elephant head vases were made in 3 sizes, of which this is the second size. The model found favor with the French court as elephant head vases were purchased by Louis XV, the Prince de Condé, and Madame de Pompadour. This potpourri vase with candle holders reflects the quest for innovation that characterized so much of the Sèvres factory's production of the 1760s. The vase could have been used as potpourri. The scent of petal inside could waft through the panel of pierced trellis work at the top, as you can see. And the 2 flanking candle sockets allowed them to serve as candelabra. Yet it seems probable that they were primarily intended for decoration. Both the unusual and the complex form and the dual ground color of pink and green made it wholly distinct from the prevailing style in the era. The decor is attributed to Charles-Nicolas Dodin, who interpreted elements borrowed from the Fourth Flemish Feast engraved by Jean-Philippe Lebas after a painting by David Ténier-Lejeune from the Cabinet de Monsieur le Comte de Choiseul. On the reverse, a rich floral group adorns the cartel. The assembly of specific Sèvres vases effectively transforms them into sculpture too. Mercier merchants, who were customers of the Manufacture Royale from its inception, were known for their ability to transform seemingly mundane objects into objects of great value. In this example, the shape of the vase is copied from a Chinese model, which the gilded bronze mount transforms into a candelabra. The mount is inspired by design by Delafosse and Lalonde, who were prominent proponents of the neoclassical style, evident in the angular handle, acanthus garlands, and antique-style friezes. This practice was adopted by Mercier merchants in response to their customers' preference. In some instances, sculptures are mounted directly with bobèche. The Enfant Bourgeois model 1, 2, 3 lights, also designated as au panier, au tambourin, au corps d'abondance or au corps de chasse, were developed under the direction of Boiseau in 1773. In 1794, the candlesticks were referenced in the inventory of Madame du Barry personal effects. Empress Eugénie showed a predilection for reinterpretation of 18th century models. A commission for her apartment at Saint-Cloud involved 2 free-light children candlesticks in soft porcelain mounted on turquoise bases. This commission marked the inception of series of reissue that continue to the present day. The majority of the pieces were sold, with 111 placed on consignment, notably at the French Embassy in London and in the French Consulate General in New York. The aforementioned candle holders also gave rise to an Art Nouveau variation between 1904 and 1906, exemplified by Guyot's Children with Pine Branches or Poppy Flowers. Let us take a step back in time and enter in the world of intimacy for a moment. Here, I would like to discuss night lights. There are genuine sculptures which are sometimes transformed into architectural elements. This object consists of 4 separate pieces. The baluster-shaped pedestal has an opening on the side to contain a small dish, and it supports a hollow octagonal middle section on top of which sits a piercer cover. The function may not be evident at first sight, but as often with Sèvres porcelain, the decoration can provide a clue. The cherubs and trophies allegorical of sense of smell and connected specifically with burning liquid perfume indicate that it would have been used as perfume burner. Missing metal fitting would have allowed liquid perfume to be heated over oil and awake in a little dish. Alternatively, as suggested by the hen and her chicks on the top, the fittings would have been filled with water over which an egg would have been perched, lightly cooked by the rising steam. This piece would have been both useful and a luxury toy in the bedroom or boudoir of Madame de Pompadour. Nightlights are also technical objects. It is important to note that while these objects are works of decorative art, they are also objects whose technical realization requires great mastery. The manufacturer's graphic art collection contains numerous study drawings which demonstrate the extent to which the quest of perfection at Sèvres is a result of extremely precise work. Viviane Mesky provided an excellent demonstration on this today. This work, created in 1923 by Henri Rapin in the style of Art Deco, features a distinctive ball shape made possible by the use of the electric light, which is a novel innovation at the time. So as you can see, Sèvres follows the innovation inside and outside. We will now examine the evolution of lighting at Sèvres. As previously discussed, the evolution of self-production has been closely linked to the evolution of taste and the constant technical research carried out by the workshops. So, the shape was initially produced in 1810 as an inkwell and a lamp. Here you have the drawings of the lamp. Subsequently undergoing a transformation into a sugar bowl. The sugar bowl is in the exhibition. The striking violet hue of the object is a notable feature, for the factory has also produced examples in white and gold. It is likely that the creator of this piece was Alexandre Brognard, an accomplished scientist who studied zoology and paleontology. He is regarded as one of the most significant directors in the history of Sèvres. The influence of the 1851 World's Fair in London, particularly through Winston's Majolica, initiated a renewed enthusiasm for the sculpture's production at Sèvres. 4 artists made their mark on this occasion: Jules Klagman, Jean-Denis Larue, Marc-Emmanuel Solon, and Claude-Édouard Forgeot. I'm sorry. I lost my... Yes, sorry. The use of sculpture for utilitarian purpose, often with decorative embellishment, has a long story in Sèvres, as you know. Decorated sculptures created by Solon could be adorned with a bowl or a candlestick. The candlesticks were designed by Joseph Louis Nicole. Further example of Solon's work can be seen in the exhibition, featuring the enamel color characteristic of his style. Claude-Édouard Forgeau's sculpture, surtout aux figures, represents a significant contribution to his collaboration with Sèvres. He produced the initial figures in 1861, and the light-older figures currently under consideration were created in 1864. These figures were crafted in a neoclassical style using celadon-colored porcelain past and enhanced with color in underglaze firing by Forgeau himself or under his direction. Unfortunately, this piece was never exhibited in its entirety, and its colors was not well received by the public. The lamp, designed by Klagman, was exhibited at the 1851 exhibition. It is also referred to as a Carcel reflector lamp, oil lamp, in the 1848 registers. The lampshade was composed of 4 figures representing the evening star and dawn, sleep and silence, while the base evoked dreams. I put you here the drawings because I'm sorry, my picture is so bad. So the World Fair as the second half of the 19th century transformed candle holders into monumental torches, veritable sculptures and architectural pivots. They were part of more general movement at Sèvres of emulation in the workshop, with assiduously sought to develop materials and techniques. To move towards monumental forms and feats of prowess quickly emerged as a territory to be explored. This torchère d'appartement by Louis Carrier-Belleuse won the Prix de Sèvres in 1883. This work is a true masterpiece in terms of its size and the work done on the bobèche, whose weight necessitated the installation of metal reinforcement along the entire length of the torches. Between 1905 and 1910, the popular lamp appeared in urban homes, reflecting the widespread use of electricity since its invention in the end of the 19th century. The Art Nouveau period paid little attention to lightings. It was until the exhibition La Cité Moderne in Lyon in 1914 that the first examples of lighting exploiting the transparency of engraved porcelain appeared. This innovation is described in the 2 anterooms where it is exhibited. Thanks to the ingenuity of Mr. Edme Couty, the manufacturer has been able to present an experiment in the use of biscuit porcelain for electric lighting. Using very simple balls and tulips and playing with the decoration engraved in the material, Mr. Couty has created chandeliers and candelabra in porcelain. Couty has created chandeliers and sconces with an unexpected appearance, which emit a very soft light and whose shape can be varied ad infinitum. So it's a dream, no? Production then accelerate between 1922 and 1930, when no fewer than 318 lamps, lampshades, cups, lights, basins, and lamp covers was produced. The 1932 Luminaire catalogue, for example, presents a wide range of cutouts, nightlights, and sconces. The shapes, often designed by Henri Rapin, are decorated with geometric or naturalistic motifs by Jean-Baptiste Gauvenet, and sometimes with metal mounts by Edgar Brandt. You have example under yours. The Exposition internationale des arts décoratifs et industriels modernes of 1925 left a deep impression on people's minds. Sèvres built a highly visible pavilion to showcase the excellence of its production. Lamps naturally found their places there. First in the pools, which were illuminated by luminous animal, like this. Yes. I think also, wow. Then into the boudoir where Henri Rapin's luminous fountain was on display. This one. Henri Rapin designed the general sketch and Govnet the engraved ornament for this fountain created for the boudoir of the Manufacture Pavilion at the 1925 exhibition. The play of reliefs emphasized the translucency of the paste, enhanced by the movement of the water. With regards to these works, I am pleased to inform you that I'm sorry, there's a lack of one slide, so you have just to imagine it. So I'm pleased, nevertheless, to inform you that the last month, thanks to one of our colleagues, Anaïs Boucher, we found and acquired the ornamental tiles that were for the niche in front of which the fountain was exhibited. So it's complete now. Yeah. So you can just imagine the same drawings for the tiles as for the top of the fountain. But I'm so sorry, this slide is, yes, with I don't know where I don't know where, but it is. The tiles were made by Jean-Baptiste Govnet. Let's go far away. We are in Tokyo now. The largest example of this vase with its gadroons decoration and double crowns of scroll covering the top was installed by Henri Rapin in 1932 in the residence of the Imperial Prince Asaka in Tokyo, hence its names Vase de Tokyo, but also Tour au Parfum, perfume tower. The vase was installed in a residence built entirely in the Art Deco style and designed by Henri Rapin and René Lalique. Production slowed considerably over the next 3 decades, with only 164 pieces produced. The Govnet chandelier and the 4 Maurice Prey lamps, designed between 1949 and 1960, make up the bulk of the lighting work. At the end of the 1970s, under the impetus of its new director, Serge Gauthier, the manufacturer renewed its links with the artistic world, while at the same time emphasizing its traditional expertise. The most famous artists were invited to renew the shapes and decoration, including Jean Arp, Étienne Hdu, Alexander Calder, and Marcel Fiorini, a renowned painter and engraver. In 1969, he created 2 lighting objects, a candle holder and a lamp. For the lamp, he used the etching work on linoleum as a model, playing with the thickness of the material and emphasizing the translucency of the bisque porcelain. More than 400 of these works were made between 1970 and 1990. Ah, yes. François-Xavier Lalanne Canard is at the crossing of several themes dear to Sèvres, as it combines the skills of the artist and Sèvres craftsman, the work of sculpture, the function of tableware, and the play of light, as it is composed of candlestick. There are 2 versions of his work published in an edition of 70. The first is from 1972 and includes only the central piece of the surtout. Here, the candlesticks are at the center of the three water lily flowers. The second version, from 1978, was completed with three separated candlesticks to enhance the centerpiece of the surtout table. This peculiarity of his work is it has a porcelain part made by in the factory and a metal part made by the artist in his studio. This centerpiece here belonged to Yves Saint Laurent, the famous French couturier, and another, but without the bourgeois, belongs to the president of the French Republic, Georges Pompidou. As always at Sèvres, the question of the relationship between the object and its function is never far away. At the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, Sèvres Manufactory collaborated with artists and designers, continuing its research into forms and style. Each of their interpretations plays on the balance between form and function. In 1991, Sylvain Dubuisson was invited to Sèvres to create a lamp. It is composed of 5 porcelain modules in Sèvres blue, placed with 16 cavities of different size to allow the light to pass through at different intensities, as well as blind hole for fizz and fevers. Crystal beds on a background of metallic blue Swarovski mirror, and inscription qualifying the light complete the decoration. The level and complexity of the workmanship sets it apart from the rest of the manufacturer's production. The then minister, Mr. Jack Lang, known for his politics and the unprecedented budget he obtained for his ministry, was not wrong. He asked for the work to be deposited in his office, where it was delivered on December 28, 1992. The lamp was returned to Sèvres at the end of the minister's term of office and then deposited in the Musée des Arts Décoratifs à Paris, where it was on permanent display. Returned in 2017, it is now on display in the room of the Musée National de Céramique in Sèvres. Thanks, Judith. In 2008, on the initiative of the Comité Colbert, of which it is an associate member, the Sèvres Manufactory launched the Biennale Espoir de la Création competition for art and design students on the theme of candlestick and candelabra. Geoffrey Istas was unanimously chosen as the winner for his modular porcelain candle holder. Ettore is a sculptural tribute to the great designer Ettore Sottsass. Ettore is conceived as a set of elements that can be stacked at will to create one or more candle holders or different shapes and heights, or to create a stable centerpiece. Let's play. In 2010, the manufacturer invited Andrea Bronzi to create a set of 11 pieces in limited series of height. Goblets, chalices, corollas, and candlesticks of rare finesse in soft porcelain are tinted in the mass. Shapes reminiscent of vegetal lines underscore the organic character of work. This set is a quotation of the traditional vocabulary of the manufactory in its taste and in its utilitarian character, but it is based on forms so fragile that the candlestick cannot really find their functions. The surtout, the centerpiece on display is the only one in the national collection. This is the first time it has been exhibited outside France. in 2012, Brazilian designer Gustavo Lin's dress marks the meeting of haute couture and workshop excellence. This unique piece is made of 27 porcelain panels that break up the general movement of a dress while retaining the imprint je vais y arriver, of the body. The play of material is reflected in the contrast between the made porcelain biscuits on the outside and the enamel on the inside, while the painted gold on the inside is enhanced by the lighting system, transforming the dress into a suit of lights. In this 2018 work, the artist Julio Lopac plays with the translucency of porcelain to make the sculpture illuminated from the inside. The pretext for a game of reduction and expansion of forms. He interacts with visitors to create impressions of movement through a play of lines and contrast. In recent years, collaboration with artists has led to new experience on the theme of lithophany. In October 2020, as part of his exhibition Ici mieux qu'en face at the Petit Palais in Paris, the artist resurfaced from the museum reserves of daguerreotypes by Léon Riesner. Among them was the image of his daughter Thérèse sleeping. At the time, the artist was in residence in Sèvres manufactory, where he discovered the principle of lithophane. The process used here consists of casting a porcelain plate, which plays with the translucency of the porcelain to reveal the motif in different thicknesses. This work is a true tour de force, as the plate measures 40 per 30 inches with a thickness of less of 1.3 inch. When the work was first exhibited, it was placed next to a bay window, allowing the motif to appear and disappear depending on the time of the day, evoking the cycle of sleep. Using the same technique, Cécile Canel, winner of the Grand Prix Design Parade de la Ville à Noailles in 2021, created the Planisphère Céleste. This perpetual calendar features a lithophane planisphère disc, a graduated dial, and a candelabra. It represents the starry sky of year. It must be set by the amateur astronomers who use it. The disk must be manually aligned with the date according to the time of night. Its soft illumination makes it ideal for night observation. So, as you can imagine, we had to take some painful choice in order to bring you the luminaire produced by the manufacturer de Sèvres. Now it's up to you to determine the nature of the interplay between lights and sculpture from one work to the next. Beyond this question, I would like you to remember the tireless search for excellence, the virtuosity and the richness of the dialogue that the manufacturer de Sèvres created with the artist it has invited. Thank you.
And we can take just one question, and then we do have to move on to the next speaker.
Oh.
Just a quick question. How many pieces are made a year these days? How many pieces are produced?
A year or?
Yeah.
Nowadays is between 5,000 and 6,000 a year. Yeah, it's a manufactory, so it's not like in the industry. Bernardo, for example, produced 2 million a year. Yes, but we are not speaking of the same thing, same way to do the things. Yeah.
So we'll be able to continue the conversation in the reception, but thank you so much, Swazi.
So our last speaker today is Judith Cernogora, and without too much surprise, she's a curator of contemporary art at the Musée National de Céramique, so that's why we end with her. And she arrived in 2018, and very soon after, she worked on the reinstallation of the contemporary art collection in the museum, along with Viviane. We reinstalled the 18th century, and it's a way to redisplay and represent that pretty remarkable collection. She worked at the same time on a major exhibition, Forme Vivante, which explored the relationship between ceramic and the living world from the Renaissance to the present day. Prior to her arrival at Sèvres, she was a director of the Musée de Vernon in Normandy. And during her 6-year tenure there, she curated several exhibitions focusing exclusively or almost on Impressionism and contemporary art. Judith is also graduate from the prestigious École du Louvre and the Sorbonne in Paris, and she will talk today about contemporary furniture produced at the Sèvres manufactory. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I would like to thank Susan Weber for the invitation today and all the organizers of the symposium. This is a great pleasure and great honor to be here today. Just before I start, just a few words of historical context to explain this tradition of furniture adorned with porcelain plaques. At the Manufacture de Sèvres, the use of porcelain to create or decorate furniture elements dates back to the 18th century. Porcelain plaques set in wood became one of the great innovations of the Louis XV style. It was around 1770 that the merchant Simon-Philippe Poirier seems to have been the first to appreciate the decorative potential of porcelain plaques with their bright, unalterable colors, and to have the idea of embedding them in furniture. From the 1780s onwards, these plaques of all sizes became increasingly popular. Sorry, it's too fast. Here you can see the Jewel Conference stand, which is at the Metropolitan Museum, and it features various Sèvres porcelain plaques inlaid in an oak cabinet. There is a seemingly paradoxical choice to incorporate a fragile material such as porcelain into functional furniture. The introduction of porcelain plaques into the surface of furniture represented an unprecedented innovation in furniture ornamentation. This tradition continued into the 19th century and was revived in the second half of the 20th century. Collaborations with artists, designers, and architects flourished. Functional yet luxurious and extravagant, the furniture created at Sèvres from the 1970s onwards blends materials such as wood, metal, and porcelain. Pedestal tables and cabinets with geometric lines are inspired by nature, but also a bar in the shape of ostriches or a sofa made entirely of porcelain are technical challenges that have helped bring porcelain work to the highest level of technical virtuosity. So here you can see this Barotruche by François-Xavier Lalanne. François-Xavier Lalanne and his wife Claude are renowned for creating hybrid pieces of furniture that are both functional and naturalistic, such as the secrétaire rhinocéros and the banc crocodile, the crocodile bench, or as Swazik has just shown us, the centerpiece with the duck and the water lilies. The ostrich bar is a technical feat, but the combination of porcelain and metal is highly complex due to the extreme fragility of porcelain. Although it gives the appearance of an animal sculpture, this work is also a real bar. First, I would like to show you this sketch, which is at our archives in the manufacturer. It's a pencil on tracing paper with some technical indication on it. So as I say, it is also a real bar. This is a photo that was taken in the studio of the artist at Uri near Fontainebleau, because the adjustment of the different elements and of the metallic part of it was done not in the manufacture of Sèvres, but at the studio of the artist. Here you can see the artist on the left looking at his piece. In the middle, the man with the glasses is Serge Gautier, the famous director that became director in 1964. Oh, sorry. Don't know why it goes so fast, sorry. And behind them, you can see several artisans that worked on this bar. And here you can see also, François-Xavier Lalanne, and you can see the open wings of the bar. The wings of the two ostriches are articulated and lift up to hold bottles. The egg in the center also opens to serve as an ice bucket. So you can see here with the open wings. And several details of it. Of course, as it is very fragile, we avoid opening it. So I just wanted this to show you the right photo, because we can see Serge Gautier, the director of the manufacturer, who is playing with the egg among a Chinese delegation. So 6 editions of the ostrich bar were made, one of which, at Georges Pompidou's request, the French president, it was deposited in the Élysée Palace, where it remains to this day. There was also an example in the Yves Saint Laurent and Pierre Berger collection. And now, as you can see it at the Musée de Sèvres. Now the bar Sauterelle. This bar is one of only 2 that were ever made. Its twin is owned by Queen Elizabeth II, having been gifted to her and the Duke of Edinburgh by French President Georges Pompidou in 1972. The larger-than-life grasshopper is made of Sèvres porcelain and polished brass. It opens also to reveal 2 capacious hinged compartments for bottles of libations and beverage glasses, while its wings do double duty as drink trays. The Sauterelle bar is a true fusion of art and design, being not only intriguing and sculptural, but also creative and functional. It offers a duality you rarely get with other designers, and you can see here also 2 sketches we do keep in our archives. nearly 10 years later, a cabinet by Bonetti and Garouste, a graduate of the École Commando in Paris, Elizabeth Garouste began her career creating theater sets and costumes. Mattia Bonetti studied applied arts in Switzerland. They formed a partnership in 1980 and continued working together until 2001, when they embarked on independent careers. Influenced by primitive civilizations, the pair is at the origin of a so-called barbarian current, but their art combined the most eclectic references, traditional know-how, and cutting-edge technologies. A major piece in their work, this Cabinet de Sèvres, was published in 1989 by the Neo2 Gallery and produced in collaboration with the Manufacture Nationale de Sèvres. Its style distinguishes it from the barbarian current often associated with Garouste and Bonetti, and is more reminiscent of a Japonism evoked by the graphic line of the wave and the use of lacquer. Wood and porcelain play on the unexpected relationships between materials and techniques so dear to Garouste and Bonetti. The cabinet is in orange lacquered wood with 2 doors, decorated with Sèvres blue porcelain plaques forming wave motifs on the front and sides, the handles also in porcelain. At the top, a porcelain tray on 4 straight legs joined by the brace. Laurent Matras and Fabien Cagani, the 2 men behind Dello Lindo, pursue several activities, namely design, scenography, and education. They first met at the École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs in Paris, while studying interior architecture, where they began collaborating on studio projects and for competitions. At the end of their studies, they formed Dello Lindo, the unique signature for all their projects. Depending on the periods and their opportunities, the pair turned their attention to interior architecture, furniture, and object design and scenography. For the Manufacture Nationale de Sèvres in 1993, they designed a pedestal table prototype. The folding pedestal table they developed at the Manufacture de Sèvres consists of an aluminium base and a 40 centimeters diameter round tray. Oh, sorry, I don't know what it makes in inches. In soft porcelain, decorated with a rose and available in 4 versions or in 4 different colors: red, yellow, blue, and green. The decoration is applied in the offset workshop. Each rose design uses 5 systematically superimposed layers of color. The first layer of the offset print corresponds to the darkest color of the rose, the second layer to a lighter shade, and so on, until the fourth layer, a flat color delimiting the total surface of the rose. This background is doubled to obtain a denser color, resulting in 5 passes for a print run. And we also keep the different sketches of the archives. And so, as you could see, 2 more examples were planned, the orange and purple one. Now, speaking of André Dubreuil, he studied drawing in London before becoming an antique dealer and then a decorative painter. Back in France, he created furniture and decorative objects using a variety of materials such as wrought iron, enamel, copper, and mother of pearl. The chairs, chests of drawers, mirrors, and cabinets he creates play on contrast of volume and material. For this pedestal table created at the Manufacture, André Dubreuil combined a porcelain plate with a pink and yellow checkerboard pattern with a wood and metal structure. The soft porcelain plate is cast by the slip casting workshop. Another example of this pedestal table features a uniform enamel pattern with the famous Sèvres blue for the plate. So you can see, yes, the sketch and the example with the checkerboard pattern here. French by birth, Nathalie Dupasquier moved to Italy, where she became a founding member of the Memphis group alongside Ettore Sottsass and Michele De Lucchi. A design and architecture movement, Memphis, advocates the use of bright colors and decorative motifs, placing greater emphasis on the form and meaning of the object than on its function. Nathalie Dupasquier is inspired by the Louis XV tradition of decorating furniture with Sèvres porcelain plaques. The decorations completely cover the plaques, made of soft paste, in the slip casting workshop. They are painted using the low fire technique. The technical difficulty lay in the fact that the colors had to be applied in a flat, undifferentiated manner, like a lacquered surface, requiring several layers for each color. So here you can see the back of this cabinet. She also did a boîte à ranger les lettres, letterbox. And here, as you can see, 3 plaques, the bottom of the box and the 2 panels. Here's the bottom. Here you have the 2 panels. Of brightly painted porcelain are set into the lacquered wooden furniture. Putuazing and painting in solid colors give this letterbox the appearance of a lacquered surface. In 1995, the Atelier de Recherche et de Création of the Mobilier National, the Research and Creation Workshop, commissioned Reina Dumas, an interior designer and furniture creator, to design 3 modular tables, which were completed in 1997. The tables were designed to be small enough to fit into any space. Intended as both a pedestal table and a work table for a ministerial office, the tables feature a pivoting top whose four corners unfold to reveal a work surface. Each table is crafted in a different wood. So here you have it in Norwegian birch, Honduran mahogany, and this one is in wenge, and adorned in the center with a square of red leather, white marble, and Sèvres porcelain plaque. The Norwegian birch table, the first to be made, presented stability problems due to its light structure. The other two models were therefore made in sturdier woods, with a belt placed under the top. For the wenge wood table, the porcelain plaque was enameled in Sèvres blue, the manufacturer's signature color obtained from cobalt oxide. Also at the Mobilier National, another desk by Olivier Gagnère, at the request of Catherine Trottmann, then French Minister of Culture, and as part of the major projects for the year 2000, the Furniture Commission of the Mobilier National commissioned designer Olivier Gagnère in 1996. He designed a desk in beech wood with 4 porcelain legs. Although the order for these elements was ultimately awarded to Manufacture de Sèvres, Bernardaud in Limoges was also approached. The initial project involved the production of 96 porcelain plaques to decorate the base of the desk. In the end, 32 plaques were produced, with a gold drop pattern. The soft paste porcelain plaques, lined and assembled in a cross pattern, as you can see in those drawings, are designed to fit into the rebate of the uprights. The choice of soft paste is explained by the fact that it offers good mechanical strength, limiting deformation. The decoration was executed in porcelain and painted with gold, using a brush on biscuit, then scrapped and embossed after firing at 840 degrees to obtain a satin gold effect. Because of the complexity and time required to create the settling decoration, a great deal of thought has gone into the creation of the drops. Several techniques were considered, including hand painting, offset printing, or adding relief on porcelain plaques. After several trials and reversals, it was unanimously agreed between the artist and the teams of the Manufacture de Sèvres and the Mobilier National that the drops would be created in light relief, in gold, on a colored water green background. Several trials were also made for the color of the feet, with a red background being considered at one point for the porcelain plaques. The artist's final choice was Céladon, a water green color which is named 30B at our laboratory. The plaques were assembled at the Mobilier National by ARC, the Research and Creation Workshop. To complete the minister's office, Olivier Gagnère was also commissioned to produce 2 small consoles, chairs, and a desk return. However, due to the minister's departure, the furniture was not installed at the Ministry of Culture. Bertrand Lavier, the famous artist Bertrand Lavier, did this bocca, which is an exceptional masterpiece. Bertrand Lavier's La Bocca is a transcription in Sèvres porcelain of a lip-shaped sofa imagined by Salvador Dali, inspired by the luscious lips of Hollywood actress Mae West, a cinema sex symbol of the 1920s, 1930s. It was popularized in the 1970s by Italian design publisher Goffram. La Bocca, the first sofa to be made entirely in Sèvres porcelain, is a true technical feat, requiring 18 months of work, research, and testing by the manufacturer's artisans. Representative of Bertrand Lavier's work, the piece reflects the artist's propensity to question the status of everyday objects. In choosing porcelain, he proposes an original association between a traditional technique and a popular design object, whose nature is modified with a keen sense of subversion tinged with humor. Thus, under his impetus, the sofa becomes unusual because it is both too hard and too fragile. Comprising 8 plaster molds of 4 parts each. Each piece required 200 kilos of porcelain slip. Each element was baked at the same time at 1380 degrees. It took 3 weeks to adjust the fired elements, after which they were spray glazed with a colorless glaze. The red tint, made on site for the occasion, was applied in 3 coats by brush before final firing at 680 degrees. A metal frame was slipped into the sofa to hold it together and facilitate transport. La Boca thus takes on a spatial connotation of both tradition and innovation. Through this work, Bertrand Lavier raises the question of the relationship between design and sculpture, or more generally, contemporary art. Categories, I quote, categories like crosswalks are just waiting to be crossed. At the time of its creation, La Boca was presented in the Objets d'Art department of the Musée du Louvre, in the place chosen by the artist and for which it was designed, as part of the exhibition Contrepoint. You can see the installation in the grand staircase of at the entrance of the museum. We did it 2 years ago now, and it was a big event and a really heavy operation. And all the men, who worked on it, they had to hold each part on their back. So yes, it was a big operation, and that's also what it was not possible to make it travel until here, because it was a bit difficult. So if you want to see it, you have to come to Sèvres. And now, as you can see it at the entrance of the museum. Trained as an architect, Christian Bischer accepted the invitation from the Manufacture de Sèvres to create a porcelain work in the tradition of architectural ceramics, in memory of the architectural ceramic department created around 1890 by Georges Vogt, director of technical works at the Manufacture. You can see here there are 2 vases in the exhibition, actually. This vase, lace, and the double lace. And also, it was difficult to do the transport for the clustra. Sorry. Christian Bischer said, "When the idea of carrying out a project at the Manufacture de Sèvres took shape, I asked myself the question of the role of the architect at Sèvres. I designed architectural elements such as friezes, lamps, and partitions in a spirit of molding and stucco to be integrated into the space. At the same time, consulting the archives let me do the work carried out in Sèvres according to Pierre Patou's drawings for the 1925 Decorative Arts exhibition, Monumental Vases, Partitions. The lace project thus took shape, like a construction set based on a module, forming a vase when used in pairs and a partition when used repeatedly." Bischer's discovery of the reticulated porcelain technique at Sèvres led him to draw a parallel with the architectural interplay of full and empty spaces in Moucharabieh. The basic module is a porcelain biscuit, as you can see it. Oh, sorry. The basic module is a porcelain biscuit with a 9 cm square cross-section and a total height of 62 centimeters. By multiplying the modules, the basic form can be expanded in space, doubling it to form a double vase and culminating in a true clustra, an open work wall created by assembling 9 to 27 modules. It was the first. Here you have the 9 and 27 modules. This claustra is composed of 9 repetitive modules installed in 3 columns of 3, 4, and 2 laces. The assembly and interweaving of the laces operates like a mesh, lace or chain mail in porcelain biscuit, giving his claustra a powerful decorative and architectural dimension, also reminiscent of Brancusi's tall column. The serial and mathematical aspect of the repeated motif give the object a fluid line, inscribing the work in a moving aesthetic typical of kinetic art. Fueled by a rich creative background, Noé Duchaufour-Lorentz approaches design with an instinct and sensibility that gives form to projects ranging from architecture to furniture, interiors, to limited edition collections. His sculptural work showcases a respect for the past, combined with a simplicity of line and an honest desire to create pieces that last. His approach to design celebrates the meeting of heritage, materials, forms inspired by nature and craftsmanship. Odyssey, the table Odyssey, is a meeting point between French tradition and American innovation. The vase lit, which inspired this design, is a 19th century icon designed by the Manufacture Nationale de Sèvres. Here, it is mounted in an oversized version with a floating top of anodized aluminium made by specialist Neil Fay in California, the global leader in creative aluminium with over 60 years experience in cutting-edge manufacturing technology and design. I'm sorry, the sketches are very bright. Here you can see details on the table. In 2000, the Doshi-Levin couple created a design studio combining 2 sources of influence, Indian culture and industrial design. Invited by the Manufacture de Sèvres to revisit porcelain furniture, the Doshi-Levin designers, the duo is composed of Nipa Doshi and Jonathan Levin, they imagined this cabinet as a small architecture built on a wooden structure. Highlighting the diversity of aesthetic possibilities and materials, the production of the porcelain plaques mobilized a wide range of skills: plastering, slip casting, polishing, enameling, and spinning. The decoration workshops colored or gilded the elements using the Grand Feu color palette and pure 24-karat gold, playing with gradient, matte, slightly granulated satin, or glossy effects, presenting a glimpse of the different textual and color effects specific to Sèvres. The cabinet doors are clad with several porcelain plaques or shapes, cut, open-worked, textured, colored, and superimposed to create relief and plane effects. The wooden structure was entrusted to a cabinet maker, and after adjustment by the sorting and polishing workshop, the assembly and chiseling workshop completed the assembly by attaching all the elements to the cabinet doors. Here you can see the inside. The overall structure of the cabinet, with its tilted base, resembles real architecture, a reference to Le Corbusier and his creations in Chandigarh, India. And to finish my communication, the Nando studio was founded by Oki Sato, who was born in Toronto, in Canada. After studying architecture at Tokyo's Waseda University, he decided to launch his own studio, Nando, in 2002. Nando means modeling clay in Japanese. The Sakura collection includes both a vase, you can see it and who is exhibit at the Sèvres Extraordinaire. It includes both a vase featuring cherry blossom branches. Sakura is Japanese for the period when cherry blossoms open, and a series of coffee tables in Sèvres porcelain biscuit, whose tops, like a motif by Escher, gradually transform from a leaf into a geometric pattern. Fascinated by shapes and their contours, the Japanese designer has conceived legs that represent the shadow cast by the tabletop. The Hasu table is made up of an assembly of water lilies, which come together to form a tiny uniform surface. I quote, "I feel that the deep links between Sèvres and Nando lie in the approach to nature and the spirit of valuing traditional techniques, even though many elements differ from Japan to France, from contemporary design to craftsmanship, from our past to our present. I think the reciprocity of elements and the reaction of what they have in common is the attraction of this design. For Okisato, the meticulous elaboration of the porcelain biscuit recalled the principle of wabi-sabi, an aesthetic ideal of Japanese culture, referring to plenitude, modesty, and the work of men. Thank you.
So we don't have time for questions, but we will go to the reception very shortly and you can continue the conversation. But please join me in thanking Judy.
So I want to thank everyone here today for coming and attending this symposium. Of course, I want to thank again all of the speakers. I think we should thank them for their brilliant presentation. Each of them really brought to us new research, which was the goal, and I hope you all appreciate this new research shared with you. I want really to do another big thank to Susan Weber, who allowed not only this enormous amounts of knowledge put into a catalog, the fact that all of these objects came and could be shared with the American public, and also allow this symposium today with all of my always colleagues to come here and share with you their knowledge, experience, and their passion for ceramic. Thank you, Susan.